Sorry.
I can explain what that is.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. They should hear something.
Yeah.
Back.
And maybe we can tell them to guess what they're saying.
Yes, that's what I want to do.
Nobody will be able to.
That's what I want to do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're hot.
Oh, yeah, this is
You can't lean on that table.
no leaning.
We're on, you guys.
Are we ready?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where's today? What is today?
Bob's here.
26th?
Today is the 26th.
Oh, let's do a quick mic test, okay? Mic test.
Mic
Feeding
chest?
back.
Yeah.
Chop.
You do testicles?
One,
Checking.
2. What? Hey, now. 1, 2, 1, 2. Evan, go ahead.
Hello, this is Evan. 1, 2, 3,
Steve.
4.
Checking 1, 2. Hello.
Kara
Check, 1, 2, 3.
and Bob.
Test. Check.
George.
1, 2. 1, 2.
Ian, sound good?
Sweet.
I think he gave us a thumbs up.
All right, we're going to start in a few seconds. People have been asking, so we're going to be hanging out after this show to sell swag and to sign books. And we did bring some books to sell as well if you haven't gotten one. Okay? Are you good?
Jocelyn's character sucked.
It begins.
For those of you who weren't here for the LARP, Jocelyn's character sucked.
All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Today is Friday, April 26th, 2019, and this is your host, Stephen Novella. Joining me today are Bob Novella.
Hey, everybody.
Kara Santa Maria.
Howdy.
Jay Novella.
Hey, guys.
Evan Bernstein.
Why does Evan get such claps every time? I don't know.
Because he has red hair. And we have a special guest this week, George Traub.
Welcome to Bethlehem, my beautiful hometown. Yes, welcome. All rogues, welcome to Bethlehem. I'm so glad you're here.
George,
good to be here.
this is the first SGU podcast recording in Bethlehem.
Yes.
Bethlehem, right?
No, wait, you got to say it right, Steve. It's Bethlehem.
Bethlehem?
Bethlehem. Yeah,
Bethlehem?
not Bethlehem or Bethlehem, but it's Bethlehem. And there's a big debate. There's a big debate about what the pronunciation is, and the correct pronunciation,
It's 2 syllables.
Bethlehem, yes.
Why is that?
Bethlehem.
It's, well, if you think about Bethlehem, it's like Bedlam, same idea, sort of Bedlam, Bethlehem.
Bedlam.
It's based on the thing, it's that whole, I don't know why it's that way, but people get very particular, and you can tell. Like when someone says, oh yeah, I lived in Bethlehem my whole life. It's like, no, you have not. You're a liar! Yeah,
You know what Bethlehem means?
Land of fried dough?
You're pretty close.
Yes.
You're very close. In Hebrew,
Yes.
it's land of bread.
Wow, George. Oh my
Or
God.
home of bread, house
Home
of
of
bread.
bread.
And in Muslim, it's very similar. It's home of meat.
In Arabic?
So
Yeah, Arabic.
Yeah, in Arabic. Yeah. Home of meat in Arabic?
Well, meat and bread were the same word for a long time, right? Weren't they like the?
No, that's called meat cake.
Meatloaf?
Meat
Well,
cake.
no, it's meatloaf. Yeah, but no, I think there's something about meat. Like meat didn't mean protein.
Yeah.
Meat meant like certain kinds of food in general.
Sounds very confusing.
It's like pudding. Like pudding meant dessert, you know,
Right,
but not
yes,
pudding.
pudding could be
So like,
all sorts
so
of
like bread, or is it bread meant everything?
Pudding is bread in the UK. It's like
Right.
a kind of bread.
They have bread pudding.
is bread.
No, like a pudding with your meal is like this doughy bread. It's like a
Yeah,
popover.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, popover, right.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It's very confusing.
So we are all here because George called me and Steve, and it was something like this.
That's the secret SGU call that we do across the state lines.
It works.
And when he does that, my nipples get hard. It's weird. So George said, hey guys, what are you doing? Hanging out? You want to do a show? Sure. Well, on the 26th of April of next year, I have the Ice House. And we were like, okay. And that was it.
Want
Now
to
we're
do
here.
something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I said, okay, so every year I get a performance here at the Ice House. I'm part of the sort of local artists that get a chance to use this wonderful, really hip facility. once a year, and it's kind of they say do whatever you want. So we recorded a DVD here a number of years ago, which just happens to be on sale over there. Not that that's important, but it is totally on sale. In this very room, I did a concert upstairs where I did the occasional songs for the periodic table, which is one song for every element in the periodic table. We did that upstairs. We did a Sting tribute concert here. We did the entire Dream of the Blue Turtles album. Actually, Steve was there at that performance. Yeah,
that was really good.
He was the only one that showed up out of the SGU, but that's fine. And
I represented George.
represented. That's right.
He
That's
got the
right.
short straw.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's the one that wins, right? That's what you told me.
Yes.
Actually, with Bob, every straw is the short straw.
Nice. Touche.
And this year, it was kind of like, well, I got a slot again. What should I do? Could I do a concert of my own stuff? And I thought, wait a minute, let me get the crew down here. And I thought we'll do like an acoustic performance and then an extravaganza, this thing that we've done all over the world. And it was like, great. And Steve was like, well, how much of the day do we have the facility for? And I was like, all day. And he was like, okay, we're going to do a LARP and we're going to do a podcast. And I'm like, okay. And that was it. And it was, and here we are. Here we are.
It was
doing it.
It was a record-scratching moment. Like George, because again, I'm resistant to work. It's in my DNA. I can't help it. No, but I knew when Steve said that it was going to mean that I was going to be up for fucking hours working my ass. And it was a bitch to write that.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun, but it was a ton of
No,
work.
and it's always like, no, it'll work great, it'll work great, it'll work great. And then last night, 11:30, we're just like, the printer's not working. The printer's not working, and but that's how it goes. But I just talked about this on my cast this week, actually, about when you do these events, like when you're at a conference or something, there is this weird, almost zombified state you get into of like, nothing's working, everything's working, and then you do it, and like you hate it when you're in the middle of it. Anxiety, But then as soon as you're done, it's like, that was the best time ever. I have to do it again. You totally forget all the pain that had come beforehand. But
It's always controlled chaos from
Absolutely.
right up until the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's cool though.
Never started a LARP that I was running thinking, all right, everything's good. It's all set. We got dotted every I, crossed every T. It's always like, how are we going to pull this out of our ass?
Yeah.
And we
And
did.
we
We
do.
yanked that sucker out.
We
With
extracted it
pliers.
good.
Ouch.
So what are we doing here today, Steve?
So I thought we'd start with a few news items.
Okay.
Does that sound okay to you?
I'm so far.
Good, all right. And then George is going to interview us with the goal of making each of us cry.
Yes.
Right?
Again?
Again? We did that.
And then maybe we'll do a science or fiction. What do you
Okay.
think? Does that sound good to you?
Except
All right.
the crying, yeah.
So, Kara, you're going to start us off.
Oh.
I know, I'm just throwing this
Okay.
at you randomly. This is, again, this is one of those news items where I read the headline and I'm like, no,
No.
there's got to be more to it than that.
That's what I did with the pig brain thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
read that and I'm like, that's complete bullshit.
What was the
Right.
pig brain thing?
You know,
You
the
just got to
whole
listen to last week's episode.
bringing pig
No, I don't listen to the show.
bringing pig brains back to life after 4
right,
hours.
okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, but I was told, tell me if you have this kernel of information in your head. Like after 3 minutes of oxygen deprivation,
Right.
I made up a word, loxygen. That means lack of oxygen.
Okay.
No, but after a lack of oxygen, after 3 minutes,
Oxygen.
your brain starts to turn to jelly.
Yeah, it starts to turn.
Right, but 4 hours later, how can there still be brain activity after 4 hours?
Because cells take, not all of the cells are dead within that period of time. They're only mostly dead.
Right. But that means that there's-
Everybody move!
So my question, the fuck was my question? What was I saying? Oh yeah.
4 hours.
They're still needing oxygen, correct?
Yeah, so they gave him oxygen and nutrients and there was a flicker of activity. It's it's interesting, but it's not a
So
game
there's nothing
changer.
there.
No, they're not
Didn't we
functioning.
go over this like last week?
Yes, we
Yes,
did.
you did.
But this is different. This is the mind reading
This is very different.
thing that
Yeah.
comes up whenever you do anything where you're getting information from the brain. They're reading your mind. So
Yeah.
how close are we this time?
No, we're not reading our mind at all.
Yeah.
You guys may remember, I feel like it was only a month or two ago, Jay did a Who's That Noisy about synthesized speech, and we had kind of a conversation on the show about how close we were, if we're ever going to get to a place where brain-machine interfaces are going to be able to synthesize speech for individuals who either have never developed the ability to speak, or in this case, what they're really talking about is a potential for individuals who have lost the ability to speak because of damage, generally speaking, to the motor neuron. So here we're looking at a population, motor neuron disease, ALS, things like that.
yeah.
Maybe a stroke, but not a stroke within the speech center of the brain. This would not work if that were the case. But a stroke that caused motor damage, so the person could no longer produce speech. And so I'm going to read a line that I read. Ian, did we put this on Instagram? I don't know where we put that. Ian's not listening to me. I don't know where we posted it, but I was reading this article. And when you said this is the kind of article where I read the headline, and I thought you were going to a different place.
I'm leaving it to you.
Yeah, you were saying that the headlines of this were really overblown.
Right.
But the article is called Speech Synthesis from Neural Decoding of Spoken Sentences. And there's this captivating paragraph that reads as, a key component of our decoder is the intermediate articulatory representation between neural activity and acoustics. This step's crucial because the VSMC exhibits robust neural activations during speech production that predominantly encode articulatory kinematics.
Sure.
That's perfectly clear.
Perfectly clear. Yeah, this is a very hard paper.
No, but it is. That makes total sense.
It
to a
does make
neuroscientist.
total sense. Yeah, so
Yeah, but
basically,
it mentions tying the neurological activity to the sound. But that's how is that consistent? Because everyone's sound is so different.
So
Apparently they're not that different.
And the idea here is they're not tying it to the sound, they're tying it to the actual physical motion that you use to make sound.
Okay.
So historically, any brain-machine interfaces where they were looking at being able to produce sound from activity in the brain, they were looking at phonemes, they were looking at maybe individual monosyllabic sounds. But they were going directly from brain to speech sound. And what these researchers decided to do is have an intermediate decoder. So they used neural net artificial intelligence, and they used it at 2 stages. In the first stage, they asked people who were in hospital, they were getting a surgery because they had epilepsy. And it was a surgery where they put these electrodes on the surface of the brain to try and map where these seizures were popping up. And while they were doing it, the people agreed to be a part of this experiment. 5 people in hospital I think over the course of a year, they collected this data. And they just asked them to read a bunch of sentences, some that they wrote for them. I think some of them read from Alice in Wonderland, and they were able to get a big database out of that.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes.
So all 5 of these people had the net on touching their brain.
Touching the brain, under the skull, on top of the brain.
Yeah.
But they were not deep brain electrodes, they were on the surface of the brain.
Yeah,
So
brain
it's like
surface
a net,
electrodes.
kind of,
Yeah.
right?
Kind of, yeah.
And also, is this, and they were having seizures at the...
They were in hospital because they were testing where their seizures started.
Oh, I
That's
gotcha.
what the
Okay, these are
electrodes
seizure
were there. These
patients
are seizure
that-
patients,
because their skulls were
They're trying
open,
to map
got it.
seizure
Yeah,
activity.
so some people with seizures, if they're planning on doing surgery, like they want to whack out the piece of your brain that's generating the seizures, you have to do really detailed electroencephalograms. So they do brain surface EEG.
And they
put
need a
like a
decent amount of
grid of, I
data.
think it's like 24 or 36 or whatever electrodes on the surface of the brain. Wait till you have a seizure, and then
They can narrow down
then they
the
could
region.
really narrow it down because the skull really attenuates the electrical activity,
Yeah.
and it spreads out, so it's harder to localize it exactly.
And then they go in there and fry it with like a hot poker?
Well, no, then they do surgery on it.
Oh, they
They
cut
remove
it out.
it.
Yeah, they-
But the
they-
last
they
thing you want to do
literally
is remove healthy tissue, right? Or tissue that's not.
Yeah, so
the
they also have to
focus of the
test it
seizure.
to see how eloquent is this cortex, meaning how much, what will you lose if we take out that piece of brain? So they literally put it to sleep and see what happens.
Wow,
Steve,
holy
Steve,
Do
did it.
they sometimes cut the corpus callosum connecting the hemispheres?
Yeah, that's to
prevent
radical,
the proper-
but yeah.
That's to prevent it from spreading,
Right.
but not this is to prevent the origination
This
of the
is to
seizure.
take out the focus.
So give me an example.
So-
Like, let's say they put a part of your brain to sleep. What would happen?
What do
So
you mean?
they're really looking at 2 things. Do you
Like when
stop?
he said they test what's going to
They
happen.
basically
If
put half your brain to sleep and then test your memory and your speech. Then they put the other half of your brain to sleep, test your memory and your
Like a
speech.
dolphin.
And then they say, all right, so if we take out a piece of the medial temporal lobe or whatever from this side of the brain, what's the most deficit that could produce? So what you hope is that the side of the brain that's having seizures is already kind of scarred and not functioning that much,
Yeah.
and so you're not going to really lose much. But if you lose a lot, then they'll be reluctant to
Yeah.
do surgery
and
there.
everything in between, right? Because like under certain circumstances, couldn't your brain kind of remap and relearn certain things?
Yeah, but this is kind of basic functioning.
okay.
You're really going to lose too much function. So this is a population of patients who, for their own treatment, have brain surface electrodes put on their brain. So we're almost always doing extra research on them. Like, while we got those electrodes in there,
why
let's
not?
do these.
Would you be willing
would
to-
you be willing to let us do some other
The hood's
research?
open. Let's go see what's under there.
Yeah, you're never gonna, like, you can't do this research otherwise.
You can't,
right?
yeah, you can't do like an elective, like nobody's gonna agree
Right.
to get a brain
Now, do they put one of
surface
those like swing latches
much money
when
they
they
offer.
peel the piece off
Yeah,
so
like
they can
a
open it up
They
again?
do that in mice. In mice, they'll actually make like a clear part of the skull plate, so you can look in like a
that
window.
now, if that wasn't
And-
dangerous, that would be cool.
And Jay, you could see the brain pulsating.
Yeah, every time. Yeah, when
That's
they
so
breathe.
sick. Like, why does it have to pulse like that?
Because it's full of blood vessels.
Yeah, but I can't help but think it's kind of like a bunch of like rubber tubes that will eventually wear out.
Yeah, that's
do.
what blood vessels are.
Well, that's what I don't like
That's
about
what
it.
strokes are.
Stroke, yeah, that's a.
It's just a reminder that we're all going to freaking
So the
kill.
good
Or
news.
just meat machines.
So the interesting thing is none of that has anything to do with this story.
I'm so sorry.
No, so you imagine there's these 5 patients that are in the hospital, and they have this, these electrodes. They're on the surface of the brain. They're not deep, so they're not quite as specific as maybe the researchers would like, but it's still really helpful. They happen to be over the ventral sensory motor cortex, the superior temporal gyrus, and the inferior frontal gyrus. It turns out later that that ventral sensory motor cortex, very important. And so what they decided to do, these researchers, was a little bit different because they did a 2-stage investigation. Historically, as researchers are trying to figure out how we can use a brain-machine interface to synthesize speech, they could only use single syllables, like I mentioned. They look at the motor activity in the brain, they try and synthesize speech from them. These researchers decided we want this to be a little bit more specific, so we're gonna do this 2-stage. First, we're gonna put this, this electrode map, and we're gonna have these individuals read sentences out loud. And in doing so, their tongue, their lips, their jaw, and their larynx are all gonna be working. And they're mapping the motor movements of speech and figuring out where in the brain those are controlled and trying to get really high fidelity there. After that, then, they're mapping the movement of the mouth to the speech sounds. So they're not directly mapping brain to sound, brain to motor movement to sound. Does that make
That's a good
sense?
plan to me, right?
Yeah.
So
And-
Kara,
yes.
before you said, so the moving of the muscles, the physical muscles, is a different part of the brain than the cognition of speech?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
They're totally separate?
So
They're complicated.
I can give you the very, very quickie. So your language part of the brain has 2 main areas. Wernicke's area, which is basically your dictionary. That translates ideas into words and words into ideas. And then you have Broca's area, which is a specialized motor cortex, which basically gives you the ability to physically articulate the words.
Right.
And then those 2 are connected. And then there's parts of the brain that feed into and out of that central language area. So that's basically it. But then you still have to be able to move the muscles that you're then telling to move, right?
Yes. People with Broca's aphasia, for
Yeah.
example, have damage to Broca's area and they cannot produce speech.
So they have halting,
So they're like-
stuttering
Yeah,
speech.
they-
Because of the physical?
No.
No, because the brain is
because
damaged,
the
and so they're
language centers.
Yes.
Yeah.
But remember, the language center is complex, so the Broca's area.
It's the output of your language.
Are
They
you
go-
saying broken area?
Broca,
Broca.
B-R-O-C-C-A.
Researcher Paul Broca.
Like Carl Sagan's book, Broca's
Broca's
Brain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Broca's
thank
brain.
you.
So people with Broca's aphasia have difficulty with motor speech, but people with Wernicke's aphasia have a symptom that people call word salad because they have difficulty comprehending speech. So even though they can physically produce speech, all the words are like mixed up and jumbled, and
They
it
call
sounds
paraphasic errors. They substitute letters, substitute words.
it sounds very strange.
And can they like sometimes write, but they can't speak? Like they'll write clearly? but
That's
they-
something called agraphia without alexia. That is a very specific lesion in the brain.
It's like prosopagnosia, like it's a very specific part of your brain
So
that has to be
what's the
heard.
problem there is the connection between vision and language. So
Oh, okay, okay.
They can write, but they can't get the visual input into their language area, so they can't read.
So with these,
So Jay, no lemonade for us over here?
You got a bottle?
I don't want any lemonade. This is very distracting. you
Is
guys.
it lemonade or
Sorry.
that other
It's
thing?
iced tea. It's iced tea.
So what?
iced
This is fascinating for the listeners at home. Basically, Josh just put down a big bottle of Diet Decaf
wait,
Orange
Turkey
tea.
Hill Diet Decaf Orange Tea, which is the best
It's the bomb,
fucking
apparently.
tea in the
It
world.
is really good. It is really
Wow.
good, man.
My mom
Honestly.
would disagree. She's addicted to Snapple.
I don't know, man. Give it a
So
shot.
basically, what they decided to do is a 2-stage speech encoding. And they used a neural net to do this. And they were able to actually make it more robust by taking previous recordings and kind of increase the data pool that the neural net was learning from. Because of course, this was only 5 patients. In one of the patients, they did an extra step where first they coded them speaking out loud. And remember, these are otherwise neurotypical, otherwise healthy patients. They have epilepsy, yes, but they don't have any damage to their speech centers or to the motor speech, the neurons that are in charge of the motor muscles. And so a second stage that they did in only one of the patients is that they had them just pantomime that they were speaking but not produce any sound, just to ensure that somehow the neural net wasn't actually encoding the sounds themselves, but was in fact encoding the motor movement.
Taking a baseline. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I do like the idea that, so basically trying to read the part of the brain that's interpreting the speech is, we're
very
a long way
complicated,
off
yeah.
from that. Like we have no way of being able to decode that. But the brain function that correlates to motor movements is a much lower hanging fruit. So this is actually a clever approach.
It's really smart. And
Should we play the results?
Yeah, let's play the results. Steve's going to hold the microphone up to his microphone
So
and see if it can play. Where's the microphone on an iPad?
I think it's here.
Okay.
So we're not going to tell you what they're saying. Just try to think in your mind what you think. So this is a result of the.
This is
the
synthesized
system.
speech.
Synthesized speech. Ready?
Yeah.
The proof that you're seeing is unknowable in words.
Maybe play it one more time.
All right, hear it again.
The proof that you're seeing is unknowable in words.
There's something you are seeing.
Is it the proof you are seeing?
The proof you're seeing is not available in books. The second half was a little difficult.
And that's 100% synthesized from brain activity.
100% synthesized speech. And so what they decided to do to test how well this is, how well people can understand this, is they used Amazon Mechanical Turk. It's a common program that people use to get research subjects online. So people go online, they agree to participate, they usually get Amazon credit or something for their participation. So this is just like a random sample of individuals online, and they played these different synthetic speech things for them. And it wasn't that bad. I want to say that all of the synthesized speech was recognizable by at least one person, and they found that on average it was something like 70% recognizable across, all conditions. And a lot of times the things that were mixed up were similar sounding words. One of the ones they cite in the study is rabbit versus rodent. Like those were mixed up quite a bit. But I mean, it's an interesting step, but of course there are a lot of open questions, right? A, will this even be useful for the population for which it's intended, which is individuals who have motor neuron damage, so their brains are working just fine, but they can't get the information from the brain out of the mouth. They can't move.
The muscles themselves are weak.
Yeah,
So
they can't
just to
move the
clarify,
jaw, the tongue, the
They can
larynx.
think a sentence and it could read and produce.
Not yet.
Okay, so
And
but
we
what,
don't know if that's ever going to be possible.
But what is that? I still don't know the connection between that, what we heard. Like, what is the patient doing to make
So
that
what
sound?
the patient is doing is reading that sentence. Then all that information is going into a database, and then later the neural net is looking at the brain's reflection of the motor movement. So it's looking at how the brain is encoding the physical movement of the mouth, tongue,
They're
lips.
reading while moving their mouths.
Yeah.
They're reading out loud.
Oh, they're reading out loud.
They're reading out loud. But all that the neural net is getting information from is how the brain is encoding the signal to move the mouth, lips,
That is nuts.
tongue.
That is
And then it
nuts.
uses
And then
that
it's
information to
playing back,
synthesize speech. And remember, they tested on one subject, they told them not to actually produce sound.
Right.
And the efficacy went down a little bit, but it was still
Still pretty
pretty
good.
good.
But that's brain surface electrode.
That's brain, yeah, and
And
they're
you
saying,
heard the quality.
but they're saying deep brain could be better, if
Oh,
you could go deeper.
If you had
and
more
find-
electrodes,
probes.
deeper.
Yeah.
What about for deaf people that have never synthesized?
So that's the other
Language,
the
but
biggest
have-
open question
yeah.
is, can people who have never spoken
Yeah.
ever do this?
Yeah.
In my view, that's not likely with this type of technology because you have to have some sort of schema, some sort of motor pattern already in your mind that if you think about the brain-machine interfaces, we see like the monkeys that play video games and all they have to do is think the movement.
Yeah.
It's because they can think the movement, it's telling their arm to move, even if their arm is paralyzed. But their whole life, their arm was connected to that movement. But if you never developed those kinds of skills...
Well, hold on. So, but there are other studies which show that even if it's an extra arm,
True, so
your
you can
brain
train it
can
out.
adapt to it. So you're not limited to the physiology that you're born with.
But that's also very different than somebody who was
used
never
their arm.
born with it, and then basically that part of their motor cortex got filled in by nearby.
Yeah, but apparently the
areas.
plasticity is enough, though. There's enough plasticity that you could have extra arms, or you could have a tail, even if you never your brain will go, okay, there's a tail there now. I
Yeah,
better-
but don't you think that that's kind of like, if you had an extra arm, you have left arm mapping, you have right arm mapping, you have extra arm, it's just utilizing what you've already mapped. But if you are missing an arm and you've never had an arm, and you've never developed any motor control of
It'd
any
be a lot
arms,
more difficult, for sure,
you
right?
would want to do it in a very young child.
Yeah, the
would
younger
wanna-
you are,
yeah,
the better, the more the plasticity.
But it is, I mean,
explain that the monkey thing.
well, there's some really cool studies too where they would like tie monkeys' fingers together. Those were early studies, remember? They would tie a monkey's fingers together and then they would look at what was happening in the brain, and eventually these two fingers would be mapped as the same finger on the motor cortex. Or like you said, they could graft an extra finger, graft an extra arm, and there would be motor cortex representation and sensory cortex.
Surgically grafted like an extra.
Surgically grafted, so long as they could control it,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? But for something that they never ever developed, I do think it would be harder. Maybe it's not impossible, but it would be much harder.
I think it'll be like your non-dominant hand, right? Yeah, you can control it, but it's never going to feel as comfortable as your dominant hand.
Yeah, kind
See,
of
that's
the
what
way...
Jamie Lannister's having that problem.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't
He
know
needs
what
therapy or something because he can't use his left hand,
No, he can't use his right hand.
his right hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But the bottom line is, though, that there's no theoretical limitation to 100% complete brain-machine interface going both ways. It's all a technological limitation at this point.
Well, and that's even what they say in this study over and over, is that like it's yet to be seen whether people who never develop speech could utilize this. It's yet to be seen whether people with motor neuron disease or a stroke could utilize this kind of technology.
Yeah.
If the database is big enough, it may be the case that you never have to map to them, or maybe you do what many people with motor neuron disease do now, which is bank their own voice. If they're banking their own voice anyway, then they're banking the information necessary for speech synthesis.
Yep.
So then you're actually mapping to their own brain instead
Yeah.
of using a database of a lot of other people's brains. The thing that they notice, though, is that it doesn't seem, as you asked at the beginning, Bob, to be as specific as we would think. You can use a bunch of people's info, tell it to the AI, and the AI can help you speak. So that's really interesting. But both of those things are yet to be seen. I do think that probably the more an individual feeds into this, the better. And they're kind of saying that almost everything else is just kind of an engineering problem.
Yeah,
at this
it's basically an
point, which
engineering
is
problem at this
pretty
point.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the real takeaway, though, is that, George, you're right, this iced tea is epic.
Calorie free too, brother. Calorie free. Boom, boom.
Amazing. All right, Science, just, I love you.
All right, Bob. Since you're so enthusiastic, let's go to a little bit of a lighter topic, although this is deceptively heavy. So somebody actually wrote an article about what would happen if Thanos successfully killed half of all creatures in the universe.
This is written by Robin George Andrews on Gizmodo. I didn't do as much secondary and tertiary research because I'm afraid of spoilers. All right, if anybody spoils Endgame, you are what can we do?
You're banished from the SGU.
Banished. No spoilers. No spoilers.
You're going to be one of this half of the population.
We did not see it yet. We're going
We
to
will
see it.
declare you anathema and cast you into the outer darkness.
You can tell me all the spoilers you want. I don't
Who's
really care.
Thanos?
That's where I'm sitting.
So,
Bob, before you start, can everybody hear okay? We're all right? We're all good?
Thumbs
Okay,
up?
thank you. So make sure.
I'm curious, how many people saw the first Infinity War?
You have to actually give us an auditory feedback.
All right. How many have already seen this Endgame?
Oh, boy.
Okay. All right. We'll be watching you.
The sales are ridiculous, right? It's like it's already $1 billion movie. No, it's a good. It's good.
No spoilers about box office.
You don't even want to know if it's good.
So it's all about what happened.
Things slip out.
See,
believe
but
me.
you're not having
That's why
sex
I'm here.
correctly.
Things slip out.
Like that scene where
So
I gotta
the,
keep him on his toes, guys.
So the main thing was what happened, after Thanos snapped his fingers with his magical gauntlet, and what happened afterwards. Some people are calling it snap-ocalypse, which I think is pretty funny, or snaptastrophe, which is also kind of fun. Now, the understanding from the first movie, though, was that it was sentient life on the Earth, right? Wasn't that your takeaway, that it was sentient life?
Sentient life in the universe.
Well, no, in the universe. I'm talking at the scale of the Earth.
Right.
But apparently, Kevin Feige, who's the president of Marvel, he's saying that's half of the population of each individual species on Earth. Everything from humans to bacteria and everything in between.
What?
So that's what the president of Marvel said. So we're going to go with that. We're going to go with that.
Well, hold on a second, because that's complicated. That one statement alone could take a long time to unpack. Because if he was killing half the bacteria, that means everyone's flora, half of it's gone.
Right.
Maybe he
That's-
just killed all the bacteria in the dead people.
No. And that's, Jay, that's part
it's
of
random.
That's part of
Oh,
what
it's random.
that's part of what we're going to talk about, Jay. Now, if you remember, now Steve may disagree, but if you remember, Thanos said that he wanted to do this because it had to do with resources that are available, to, like, especially to his population of people on his planet, and to prevent societal collapse. He wiped out half the people, and things were so much better because there was such a less of a draw on the resources. So that's kind of why, that's what Thanos said in the
remember.
movie. But a lot of people are saying that's a horrible idea, because it might seem like, it was a sign of what a great bad guy he was, because he actually almost sucks you into that argument at some point in the first movie, right? You're kind of like thinking, oh, wait a second, all right, he's an asshole and stuff, but this might actually be a real, it might have some benefit. You know, he was kind of like sucking you into
Well, Bob, the
his
best
worldview a little
villains
bit.
are the ones that
Exactly,
truly
Jay.
believe that they're good guys. And he thinks that he is making a sacrifice
Right.
for the...
Oh yeah, he was great, but Ken Lacovera really disagrees with him on this thing. He's a paleontologist at Rowan University. He said that is a terrible idea on many levels. So why? Why would it be a bad idea? What would happen to Earth if half of all species disappeared? So here's some of the things that would happen.
Half of all individuals.
Right.
Yeah,
Each species will lose half of the individuals.
Okay.
That's the plan. So the one big thing is that it won't last, especially for people. Because think about it. In 1960, there's about 3 billion people on the planet. 40 years later, we were at 6 billion. So if we wiped out half of the humanity, in 40 years we'd be back where we are right now. So
we'd have to do it again?
Oh, even
It's kind of-
faster,
it's
because
kind of-
he didn't
right.
wipe out our technology.
Right, so it's
We
kind of
have
a-
all the knowledge we
right.
had.
It's kind of a lame solution.
Yeah.
What about food?
What about it?
We'd have half the resources, but there's
That's the
also
thing,
half the
you couldn't
people.
have
You're
the
basically
resources,
taking
right.
everything down. So like you had...
back at zero.
Yeah, you're right. It's like you're still at that level where there's not enough resources.
Yeah,
I think the president of Marvel is wrong. He just
Yeah.
killed the sentient
Yeah.
species. He says it makes no, you can kill
Yeah,
half
that's
the
ridiculous.
cattle to help our resources. I mean, that's
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing that they went with, but let's just continue with
But
that.
where do you draw the line? At what about
Viruses.
What about plant life?
Draw the line of virus. Plant life, yes.
Plants are alive.
Yeah, so he's killing trees too.
Half the trees are gone.
It's ridiculous. That's nuts.
Right. So, but what would happen? Let's roll with this, Jay,
Okay,
all right?
I'm
So what
with
would
you.
happen?
I'm rolling, Bob.
So a lot of times, another example is a company will go into this virgin territory and let's start killing all the beautiful little seals. And this has happened. They go in and they start killing
Do
animals.
they say that before
No,
they
no,
go in?
not out loud. They
Not
don't
out
say it out loud. But it has happened. They go in and they basically wipe out very quickly half of the population of certain species. So what has happened? When that happens, these species automatically will get into like maximum population growth overdrive. So they actually swing back up to where they were relatively fast.
But with
because-
less land, though, that's the problem.
Less land?
Yeah,
Yes.
because they're like Bob's saying, like they'll strip burn like
yeah, if they lose habitat, they don't recover.
Right, yeah.
Right,
But it's
right.
just if you don't deprive them of
That's the
habitat,
problem.
but you take away, you just kill them to
Right,
harvest
a lot,
them.
yes, a
They'll
lot
just
of
come
times
back.
you're just
Health
killing them, and if you're in the same environment, they're going to have maximum population growth, and they'll kind of come back very quickly as well. So another problem with Thanos' idea is species imbalance. So if you think about it, there's a lot of species that they just basically spit out kids, thousands and thousands of kids, and they just like, see ya, good luck, and they walk away. But then there's other animals that the parental care is a huge part. They have only a few kids, few offspring, and they invest a lot of time. So that's a huge imbalance, because if you're laying 10,000 eggs, and if you're just having one cute little panda cub, that's a huge imbalance. So there's a huge advantage to these species, like insects,
Spiders,
like
yeah.
frogs, like rabbits. They're gonna regain their population very fast. For example, there's a species of frogs that lays like 20,000 eggs every season. They could basically lose half of their population and be back to full strength in one summer. I mean, in one summer. So
Yeah.
that's a huge advantage.
So for them, it's like the summer of '69 every time there's a... So yeah, I mean, Bob, like, what about that frog they brought to Australia and it just took over? Didn't have any...
cane toad?
Yeah, that's it. That toad, like,
That was a Simpsons episode, wasn't it?
There's a guy in Australia that drives over them. Whenever he sees one on the road, he drives over it.
Yeah.
And you see him changing lanes, like going against traffic to kill the toads.
Yeah.
Is that what
Reverse
Thanos
Frogger.
did?
What's that?
That's pretty much what Thanos did, right?
It's exactly what it is. Exactly.
Jay's just embellishing
right.
a lot of the movie. From what I gather, I never saw it.
But there's also a habitat takeover because if you have these speedy reproducers like insects and frogs, and they're like, okay, we're back to full strength. And like, oh, look at that habitat over there. It hasn't been filled. They can go over there. So what happens is this. Janet Houle says, she's an expert in animal behavior and human evolution. She said, the end result would be a simplified global ecosystem with rare animals becoming rarer and less genetically diverse. So that's another problem. Another huge issue would be outright extinctions. We know there's tons of
That's the
species.
first thing I thought
right?
of, yeah.
Like, for example, there's 23 Hainan gibbons.
Gone.
Cut that in half. I mean, they're probably
They're done.
This-
Yeah, they're done.
Bob,
a lot of species will be done.
This news article is exactly why it's so freaking hard to have scientists and skeptics be the heroes in movies. Because imagine if you had the scientists talking about this while the Thanos thing was being uncovered, and they're
be
like,
dust.
"Well, Thanos, you can't do it, man."
But that
and
would
here's
make him
why.
a hero,
and then
right?
Thanos go, "No, but what I'm saying is all the cool
Thanos?
shit won't happen." Thanos will be like, "You're right, I can't do it," and then the movie doesn't happen.
$1 billion.
Or he says, I'm a bad guy, I'm going to do it anyway.
No, but
He
no,
thinks
but,
he's a good guy.
yes.
Okay. I should have seen the movie before.
So, all right, so besides outright extinctions, there's a lot, also, of course, these are complicated interrelationships. So there's a lot of unknowns. For example, predator-prey relationships are complicated. You can't just say, all right, half of you are gone and half of you are gone. What's going to happen? It's hard to actually figure out and predict what's going to happen. Microbes. Jay, you mentioned microbes. That's very good. Microbes and bacteria are incredibly important and fascinating.
So we'd all get diarrhea,
So
basically.
what would happen? Yeah, the bacterium, our body's bacterium, with half of that was gone. We would adapt, but you could have some funky bacteria taking over
Yep.
because there's open habitats inside of your gut as well.
You know what
So
I
who
can't
knows
help
what would
to
happen?
think of
What?
in this specific example is arguments for a flat tax. It's almost the exact same thing, right? When people argue, but it's fair if every single person gets taxed the same percentage, and then you realize very quickly that it really affects the
Some people more than
weakest, the
others.
poorest
Yeah.
and the richest in very different ways. And it's the
Right.
same thing, because some people would argue, but it's half. So how would it matter? It's half for
So
everybody.
that's what Thanos says. He says, what's more fair than this? Everyone has the
Yeah.
exact same chance of surviving.
And this
or
is
dying.
exactly why
Right.
the
What
flat
is the,
tax
what is the
not a
number
good
you
idea.
think? Is it like third? Is it like fifth? Like what would be, I mean, it's not as a nice
Well, the thing
dramatic
is-
moment of, I will kill about a sixth of humanity.
No,
It's not
but there is no flat number. That's the point. It has to
At
be
all. It's
different for different species,
species,
in
yes.
order
Yeah,
to
right.
maintain good kind of homeostasis.
That's the other thing is with all the knowledge that he had, with all the stones that he had, he would be able to get into those details and actually make it all, but they don't put
Right.
that type of information in a movie to make people
Well, he
like
wouldn't
us
be
happy.
a bad guy
Well,
if
again,
he actually did save humanity, right?
It's so much less dramatic too, Jay, when it's like, I will kill half of bacteria unless they are reproducing bacteria, and then it's 2/3, and then the other 1/6 will be for the predator, unless of course they're,
According to the Heidi
it's a
Feinberg
complex algorithm. And it's actually, you know what? Get back to me in 20 minutes. I gotta figure this out.
Over my chalk.
It would be like a program. There'd be lots of if-then statements, But he'd have godlike intelligence, so that wouldn't be much of a
All
problem.
right. I just reject the idea that he was killing half of all life. I think he was killing half of all sentient
Me too.
beings. But even if we were restricted to that, you still have the same problems. So that means for every sentient race in the universe, half is the correct number. Like, so if there was
Right.
a billion
It
people,
seems a
you'd
little
kill half.
simplistic.
If there
Oh, I
was
see.
100 billion people, you'd kill
Because
half.
his argument was that sentient people have gamed their planet.
Well, just, they're overusing
Yeah,
their
they're
resources.
overpopulated.
Yeah, you're right, Steve.
Yeah, but
because-
regardless, if you cut it in half, no matter what it is, your resources, the availability of resources will be much more beneficial.
Of course.
But what
In
if you're not
almost every
resource
case.
limited? But what if you're no?
Well,
not
yeah,
if you're
there's
not
that.
resource, because
Yeah, what if you're Star Trek Prime, the new one, the what's it, the
Discovery.
Kelvin line, and you're the Vulcans, and there's 35 of you, right? There was like 30, 40 Vulcans once Vulcan got sucked
right.
into the thing. There's 40 Vulcans, so now there's 20 Vulcans? Like,
Yeah,
they're
that's
screwed.
fair.
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
assumption is that because this film was written for an American audience, we're going to be Americocentric as we think about, or I'm sorry, for an Earth audience
Yeah.
even. We're going to be
Yes.
Earth-centric
Earth
as we
audience.
think about
I'll give
it.
you that. It was
Yeah.
written for an Earth
And so
audience.
we're thinking about how we as human beings have been so destructive of the planet. And that's using that schema.
That's the irony in this, is because we're kind of all Thanoses right now, because the diversity that we're doing to species and the effect, the species that are becoming extinct because of us. It's like we all have our little gauntlets on, and we're kind of doing it. And in some ways, we're doing it. It's worse than what he would have done. I mean, we've got whole species going extinct
Well, he's
because
doing the
of human
job.
activity.
If it really were just sentient beings, right, then it would just be human beings, right? And so he's doing the job of a pandemic or of an epidemic.
Right.
That's the idea.
Yeah, but
right?
speaking of which, so the one kernel of truth, I think, to Thanos' premise is that some civilizations may actually have like a renaissance following losing half of their numbers. And interestingly, that's exactly what happened after the Black Death hit Europe.
That was 2/3, right?
Yeah, it was a lot. But what happened was labor was cheap, and so they just threw labor at all problems. Like, I need somebody, whatever, dry out this sheep wool. Okay, here's 10 peasants to do that. But when 2/3 of Europe died, labor was in shortage, so they had to come up with machines to do labor. And so it actually spawned a lot of innovation. And so Thanos kind of has a point when he says that this will be a kick in the ass to civilizations. Which, by the way, is the same rationale that the Shadows had in Babylon 5, where they were ostensibly the bad guys the whole time. Then it's like, yeah, but we're just kicking over the anthills because that really helps you guys bring your civilizations along. Come on, 20
Great
years old,
series if you haven't
But the
seen it.
Spanish flu, which I know the numbers weren't the same, they were severe.
20 million around the world.
Yeah, I mean, they were severe, but they weren't the same in terms of, percentages. Did not have that kind of outcome. It just sucked. The Spanish flu just ruined lives. Yeah, like it didn't kill enough, and there was like bodies that they couldn't dispose of. It was a massive.
Does everybody know about this?
crisis.
1918, right?
1918.
Yeah,
1918.
and we should have called it actually the American flu because it started here.
Yeah, 20 million people died of flu.
It was during the,
But guys, we can look at it from a 30,000-foot view with no morals and not care. But the thing that we're really discussing here is the moral imperative that he should not murder trillions or quadrillions of sentient beings.
Even if he's right, who is he to decide that half of all
who
sentient
stays
beings?
in
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically, it's like after the fact eugenics. What do you even call that?
Yeah.
Why
It's
not
genocide.
90%?
Yeah, it's genocide.
Retro
Except
genocide.
he's choosing arbitrarily, right?
Yeah.
He's just saying half of everything.
Eugenics.
Culling, yeah.
Have you been to that website, by the way? There's a website where you go to the website, you hit the button, and it says either you've been spared by Thanos or you've been killed by Thanos, and it's 50-50. So I was spared by Thanos,
coin in
by the
my
way, so I'm
pocket
okay.
that does
The first
same
time.
thing.
That means that half of
but-
you would still be able to enjoy the SGU, but I definitely would be on the death list.
Yeah, half the SGU wouldn't be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, but
got
Steve,
really lucky.
they should have had you upload your picture and show you going way into dust. That would be
Right.
really cool.
All right, that was cool, though. That was a really fun
Told
news
you you'd
item.
like it.
That was like right up our alley.
And it's timely, too.
Yes.
All right. So, an article was published recently in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, on how to deal with medical misinformation, which is, obviously something that we do. That's right to the heart of the skeptical movement, countering misinformation online and in the world. This is specifically on medical misinformation. So the authors did a reasonable job of addressing some of the issues, but unfortunately, it represents exactly what's wrong with mainstream science dealing with issues that they just don't deal with on a regular basis. And this, this is exactly why a skeptical movement needs to exist, right? Because if they knew what they were doing, we wouldn't even have to exist. So here's the problem, and you know what I'm going to say, right? So the core of their problem is that they approach misinformation as a knowledge deficit problem.
We've
We talked about that.
Yeah, the SciComm movement has figured this out, like literally
I know.
10 years
That's
ago.
like, I read that, I'm like, this is like so 1990s.
Yeah, you can't just give people more data and hope that they'll make better decisions.
That's
Right.
an old
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah, so
I keep reading that
it's
a lot
well, I mean,
because it's more.
yeah. We're going to be interviewing the director for Behind the Curve next week, so it'll be out in a week or two. And I kind of felt like the SciComm people in that movie had the same issue. It's like, it's okay, it's fine, but it's a lot of like knowledge deficit kind of approach to like if we just teach science, you're still going to have flat earthers. Right?
I was just listening to a news podcast a couple of days ago, and they were covering the New York State and New York City measles thing. I'm listening to it. I'm like, cool. They're covering a topic that I am very well acquainted with. We're all of us are, been fighting against the anti-vaccine movement and everything, and they covered it, and they not once mentioned the anti-vaccine movement.
Right.
Yeah.
They
it's
were just like,
bananas.
in this community in Brooklyn, it's a lot of Hasidic Jews, and they're, and they kind of get into that, and they're talking about the little pockets here and there,
Yeah.
and they missed the most important
How could you
layer
not
of the
talk
whole
about
thing.
that? Yeah.
And then I'm like, why the hell didn't they get a skeptic on that
Right.
freaking
Yeah.
show? They just have some person that's covering it. It was like,
I find myself asking that question
I
frequently.
think, my one argument for the knowledge deficit approach is that I think in us realizing that it's not just a knowledge deficit
Yeah,
thing. We don't want to
it's
throw the baby out with the bathwater.
It's like 20% or whatever,
yeah.
and it's issue specific.
It's issue specific for sure. And I
Yeah.
do think that if it comes actually down to younger, like education. So we're talking about earlier childhood experiences and learning critical
Yeah.
thinking skills, but also learning some information. Like if children grow up really grasping around Earth, yes, they might get caught up into a flat Earth movement later in life, but if they really fundamentally understand the science before they go into it, then they'll realize that in order to believe the Earth is flat, a lot of things have to be unwound in their mind.
Part of the solution is not the solution.
It's not and the problem is everybody keeps going to that. Well, let's just give them more information.
Yeah.
Too simplistic.
Steve, didn't we say on the show a while ago that in order for pure education to make such a dramatic impact on these types of beliefs, you would have to get like your master's or PhD?
So
that's the threshold?
Yeah.
If you map out just the degree of science education, the people generally believe more pseudoscience as their education increases until you get to a postgraduate science education level, and then it drops off dramatically. So just having a college education does not protect you from pseudoscience in general.
But more than anything, that's an
Yeah.
indictment of how we educate in this country.
Well, I think but there's other social factors in there too, because the fact is, so first of all, like when people get educated, it's the Dunning-Kruger thing. They have enough knowledge to be confident enough to have out of mainstream views, right? But they also are thinking about more things.
Is that across the board, Steve? Is that like geographically and demographically across the board?
Yeah,
like,
that's a
Dunning-Kruger
pretty,
has been
it's a pretty,
replicated.
Pretty much, it
consistent.
doesn't matter where
It's
you're
pretty
from.
consistent.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, if you have a PhD in a science, then you have fixed that problem with
Yeah.
knowledge. Absolutely.
But the problem is the knowledge deficit thing, right? We teach people in our modern educational system, which is getting a little bit better, but we teach people what to think, we don't teach them how to think.
Right.
And that's a big difference.
So like their solution was we need journals to directly correct misinformation in the public. And like, that'd be nice. I'm not against that. I do think that scientists need to directly engage with the public on the public understanding of science, including debunking myths and misinformation. Absolutely. But the idea that that's the solution to this problem is incredibly naive.
Well, and it's also, we have good social science to
I know
show.
we know the answer. It's not like this is unknown.
And we have good social science to show that when you publish something and it has, X effect, and then you publish a retraction, it has
Yeah, it's almost negligible.
0.2
Yeah.
X effect. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's
There's also research looking at debunking myths, right? So if you tell somebody this is not true, that can have an equally bad response. So people don't think, oh, maybe that's true. Why
it
is he
can
bothering to
backfire.
tell me
Yeah.
that's not true? It's very complicated, the relationship between giving people information and the effect it has on the information.
and the more
So-
nuanced it is, the
Yeah.
less likely it is
Steve-
to,
Can somebody, who wrote the article?
There's two physicians wrote the article.
All right, I mean, can anybody contact JAMA and be like, hey?
Well, I mean, I wrote an article about it for science-based medicine. I'd like to submit it, a version of it,
to
to
JAMA.
JAMA.
Yeah,
and see
they'll
what
probably get
happens.
multiple submissions
Yeah.
after this article.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. But the thing is, and again, I had the same sort of reaction to Behind the Curve and to a lot of other things where they're sort of nibbling around the edges or they're just focusing it from a very narrow perspective. It's like, okay, you're going to confront vaccine, hesitancy or the anti-vaccine sentiments or whatever, pick your science denial or pseudoscience. First, you need to reform K through 12 science and just general education, right?
Yeah.
Until we're squirting out high school graduates who have a pretty thorough education in logic and critical thinking, I don't think we're going to make a dent.
Why
Yeah,
couldn't Thanos do that? Like
right.
K through 12.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, the fact
Knowledge,
that you don't take philosophy, you never have to take philosophy
Right.
in your entire academic career unless you're a philosophy major is a bad thing.
Right.
It should be core.
Or how about this? How to access and evaluate information online.
Oh, yeah.
Right? How does
Media literacy.
Media
yeah.
literacy.
Yeah,
how
that
do you
would be
evaluate,
amazing.
That shouldn't be
Just
an
that
elective.
could
evaluate
help so
resources?
much.
And then just psychologically, cognitive biases. You know, people need to know what the Dunning-Kruger is and confirmation
Yeah,
bias.
most
and-
kids don't take psychology
Yeah.
in K through 12. They don't
Right,
take
they
it
need
until
logic,
college.
they need psychology, they need media savvy, they need scientific literacy. You need all of those things.
That's why we
working
wrote the
together.
freaking book.
That is why. That's
it.
exactly.
Make it a compendium.
That's exactly.
So maybe.
Which is
maybe
also
book number-
available right over there for those of you.
Maybe book number 2 is a K through 12 companion to our book.
There you go.
Because we definitely wrote it for adults.
I'd
so,
love to do that, yeah.
We write it for kids.
And then they talk about social media, which is like, yeah, but you know, social media is just in my opinion, it did, you know, put jet fuel to misinformation, but it's a reflection of the culture. It does reinforce it, but it's not really the cause of these problems. These problems they all predate social media. It just means, all right, the editorial filters are down. So now we got to get in there. We got to get in, you know, the bush with the misinformation people, and we got to fight it on the front lines. And I do agree that scientists need to do that. And there's a lot of reform of journals and journal editing, and there's a lot, we talk about this all the time, the problems with journals, with scientific journals.
So Steve, my friend tweeted something the other day
Yeah.
that was like, you know how in movies when somebody gets a superpower where they can read other people's minds,
Yes.
and everything's just like horrible for the first like 20 minutes of the film
Yeah.
because all they can hear, that's Twitter.
No, I agree.
That's just
It's noise. There's social
yeah,
media.
it's just
And a lot of professionals think if they don't want to dirty their hands,
Yeah.
or it's overwhelming,
Yeah.
or they like get scandalized, or they get exposed, or liable, or they're liable to whatever. You know, so professionals now, scientists, physicians, need to be trained how to exist on social media as a professional,
course.
and we don't get any training.
No,
to
like
do
a big
that.
part of the even SciComm camp, which my friends Jason and Sarah and I formed now, we're coming up, I think, on year 5. Yeah, it's going to be our 5th anniversary. A big part of that is training, yes, the next generation of science communicators who want to do that as a job, but many of the people that come to SciComm camp are scientists.
Yeah.
And it's like they just want to be able to interface better. They want to know how to talk to journalists. They want to know how to be better on social media, to communicate their science in a way that is understandable, that the nuance, enough of the nuance is there, but they don't get so mired in it that they
Right.
lose the message. It's hard because
It's
people want
hard.
to stick
It's
to
a
their
skill
guns.
question.
Question for you
itself.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why the hell do people take pictures of food?
For like Instagram or something.
Wait a
Why do
minute.
people put what?
I get that. 'Cause
Why?
It's lovely.
George, I don't give
It's
a
aesthetic.
shit what you eat.
I know.
Then
but it's
don't like my posts.
I like everything else about you. But I don't get that.
It's
there's
aestheticism for them. You sit
It's
down
like
to
a
nice
it's like a
meal and
sunset, or
beautiful
it's like
meal.
a whatever.
You want to share it
But
with all
I'm
your
not
friends.
there. It's like watching
form
watching
of
people
art.
make food on TV to me is horrifying.
I get that, but
Because I
obviously-
can't eat it. I came up with a business. You watch one of those shows, right? And it's regularly scheduled. So Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, you watch the show. And somebody delivered the food they're making, so you can eat it while they're making it.
That is kind
Come
of a good
on
idea.
now.
You know, they did that with
can
Project
happen.
Runway.
You hear them whispering? They
Yeah.
all said, that's a
Do you guys remember, like with Project Runway, there was a certain season or where they would have certain looks actually available for sale right after the show. It was
Yeah.
pretty
See,
smart.
Jay, it's kind of like, you know, when you send me a dick pic, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that.
But George, I'm only 2.5 hours away now. Bob, don't even.
Not sure where to go from there.
Yeah, right, Steve?
Oh yeah, so what's
Got a
the
little
answer, Steve?
derailed.
What's the answer?
Answer
The
is
answer is all of the above. We need to do
Reform
so,
K through 12. What else?
We need to and we need more scientist
Psychom training.
engagement, and we need to teach more critical thinking. All right, but here's the final point that I want to make. So I do get frustrated when I read these. I'm like, oh, we've been dealing with this for 20 years, but my final thought is always, I'm not doing my job, right? I think skeptics, the skeptical movement, if we were doing our job, this would not happen. Why are we not getting our message to mainstream scientists so that JAMA doesn't publish an article that's 20 years out of date in science communication?
It's because of incentivization, right? It's the same thing when you see certain types of political debates where one person just says whatever they dream up and the other person's like, yeah, but I want to play by the rules.
Yeah.
And because they want to play by the rules and only cite things that are legitimate, they get crushed. Because if you just can make anything up and you don't have any moral consequence of it, you know, it's like hitting below the
You're
belt.
totally right. It's like
It's
the same.
very
It's the same
difficult for
problem
us.
that Superman has. Like it's exactly the same thing because when we play by the rules, we can't. There's nothing shifty that we can do. There's no way to be a shifty skeptic. Like you
And
have
so
to.
Right.
the best thing that I always try to tell people to do when we're doing science communication training, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things about SciComm training that make you better at knowing your audience and not trying to sound like a dick and, all these things. But I think one of the really fundamental things is like, take a lesson from social psychology. Read all of the really brilliant articles that have been written over, like, at this point, a century of people learning how to market.
Right.
There is a good science to marketing, and there are tricks and tools that you can use to make sure that your message is effective. And you're not being shady, you're just utilizing the science to ensure that your message gets out there in the most efficient way possible.
Right.
But for some reason, the SciComm community is very siloed in, like, hard sciences, and they don't ever look to the social sciences.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's the science of science communication.
Right.
Like,
But
they need
even
to
when we
speak.
do, we're not having our message heard as deeply as it should.
How old are these
We're all
guys?
still a
Steve?
small
Do you
community.
know how old these authors are? How old
Oh,
they
they
are?
might be older.
I don't know. They're probably
I've
older.
I've
So I wonder
definitely
if they're
been
old,
to,
if they're young. It's like it's.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were older. I've
Yeah.
definitely been to science communication, like been on panels at science conferences. I remember one very specifically where it was a public communication and understanding of science think tank. And we were all there, and we were sitting in a room just kind of like this, and a man, a much older scientist, stood up and was like, you know what I have a problem with is that phrase citizen science. They're not real scientists. They shouldn't be able to call themselves science. And we were like, whoa, you're in the wrong room. Like, there are even people within this movement who are still...
I know. Well, there's still
Yeah.
uncomfortableness with popularizing science, with interfacing with the public. It's still definitely like the ugly stepchild of academia, which is really unfortunate.
But they got to get with it, because you're
I
not
know,
going to
they gotta
get...
go, because we're losing the public relations
I mean,
fight.
you gotta-
Also, you're not going to get SFN or NIH funding any longer if you can't tell the public why your research matters. They're not going to give you money.
Isn't that the definition of the ivory tower? Like
Yes,
that we don't want?
There is an ivory tower.
Yeah, we
There
don't.
absolutely
I
is
mean,
an ivory tower.
the thing is, the ivory tower can still exist. Science needs to be communicated, and people have to appreciate it in order for it to hold up the tower.
The tower's going to crumble. I mean, it
But
is crumbling a
the
bit.
metaphor specifically refers to being isolated in a bubble of academia.
I've
You're not-
expanded
Up
the
here.
metaphor.
You cannot communicate to the public, but that's
We need an ivory yurt.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
no. I mean, I've experienced the ivory tower personally. Like,
How awesome is it up there?
It has a rotating restaurant.
It's kind of like the ladies' bathroom, It's like,
a
we never
magical
know. I'll
place.
never know.
it's a magical place.
There's flowers and tampons.
And couches, I hear.
But when
Don't
you
they
say
have
you
mints
experienced
next to
it,
every
Steve, you
seat?
got to finish that thought. I have experienced the ivory tower, and
No,
I'm going to
meaning,
tell you all about
like,
it.
Speaking to colleagues who have no idea about
That there's an
what's
outside
going on
world,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, what's going on out in the real world of patients confronting pseudoscience in medicine, and they think, oh, that's just all touchy-feely stuff, or those are just all the cranks. We can comfortably ignore them. No, you can't. The barbarians are literally inside the gate, and or figuratively, whatever.
Well, I think they're starting to realize this as we see epidemiology. Well, epidemiologists might be a little more hip, but let's say scientists who don't actively interface, so non-medical scientists, biomedical scientists who don't actually work in patient relations, who are seeing that herd immunity is dropping below 95%.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing the evidence now,
Yeah,
and we know it's not just cramps
What are they calling it
anymore.
now? Not they're trying to move away.
Community
Community
immunity.
immunity.
It's so hard to
Immunity.
say.
Yeah, too many syllables.
It's like a what did they call it? Like schoolhouse rap or something? Community immunity. Like
Schoolhouse
it's
rock.
like a bad video they're gonna play in science.
I'm just a bill.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yes,
I have it memorized.
got the reference. All right. Evan,
Oh boy, here he goes,
here we go.
and he's pissed.
The look on his
Evan's
face.
got his pseudoscience segment. This one
Yikes.
is interesting.
Evan, say it. Pseudo science.
You just said it for me, Jay. Couldn't say it better. A Kuwaiti academic. Anyone heard of this one? She has claimed she's invented a cure for homosexuality.
Oh boy.
There's a cure, right? Based on Islamic medicine, which is also known as prophetic medicine or Muhammad the prophet. I never knew that this existed.
So is
there
it
was
like-
something called prophetic.
Is it like faith healing kind of?
Effectively, but right. It's,
Better.
yes,
Sounds
it's,
like
it's
that.
a little bit of that. So
Yeah.
it's certainly, education of Islam, Muslim, those components, but there are also actual physical things happening. Well, her name is Dr. Miriam Al-Sohel. She has an honorary degree from the International University of Turkey.
That sounds perfectly legitimate.
Oh, yeah. 6 months.
Wait, in what? An honorary degree in what?
No, that's it.
That's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. We should hand out SGU degrees.
That's right. Here's your degree, son. And she claims that there have been trials, and she was involved in these trials. Here's what she says. This is a quote. I discovered therapeutic suppositories that curb the sexual urges of boys of the third gender, as well as the fourth gender, which is butch lesbians.
Oh my God.
Okay?
So basically you put a
didn't know
dick-shaped
that there were a
suppository in
third
there and
le-
there's your gay sex.
there was a
Did I
third.
just say that?
Yes, you did.
So wait, they're saying that there's men,
ridiculous.
heterosexual men,
Right.
heterosexual women,
Right.
homosexual men,
Boys and
and for some reason just butch lesbians.
That's it. That's what she said.
So what are lipstick lesbians?
Well, we have. She only goes as far as 4. I imagine there could be more, but
I
that's as
see.
far as she took it.
And
for
transgender
examples.
individuals.
So
It's
what's
just
the
an
cure?
honorary degree,
What
so
is
I mean,
Gender.
come on.
Yeah.
So they're
She'll get there
saying
eventually.
though that they can cure any kind of homosexuality.
Not any kind, only with the butch lesbians.
With a suppository.
No, boys as well as the butch. It works on the butch lesbians as well.
What?
But they,
With a
the
suppository.
right, with a suppository.
Go on.
Do I have to explain what a suppository? Do I have to explain what a suppository?
But wait, no,
Goes up
is
your
it?
butt.
I don't know. I
is it made
can't
out of?
help it. Like, what are? Do I even need to ask this? What are they actually sticking up their butts?
Well, you should see there is video on YouTube of this particular interview that they
Oh,
pulled this
interview. Oh,
out
thank
again.
goodness.
And she holds up 2, one for men and one for
But what do they look
girls.
like?
They look like
Suppositories.
Are they glycerin?
tampons for your butt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really.
Oh,
what
okay. It's not
suppositories
like a
look like.
glycerin type of thing. It's actually like,
Oh, it's a physical.
yeah.
So wait, but what's in it? What is it made out of?
Yeah. What is it made out? Let's find out. Okay.
Hope.
Wait, is anything you stick in your
Spikes.
butt a suppository? It doesn't have to be like a.
Well, no, some things are foreign objects. A
If
suppository
it's
is
medicinal,
medicine.
yeah, it's medicinal.
I thought a suppository had to move up.
No, it's just a little. It looks
Haven't
like
you
a
seen
tampon.
my videos, Jay? Come on. Explain all this
Here's
stuff.
the thing.
Go ahead.
Although I don't know exactly what sort of concoction might be in these things, there is a specific purpose that the good doctor is telling us about and why this and how it works. You see, and you didn't know this, but I'm telling you now. People of the homosexual persuasions have, anal worms that feed off of semen. Yeah. And what happens is the suppository goes up there and it exterminates the worm. Therefore, no more urge to have sexual
Wait, so
intercourse
butch
of
lesbians
that.
have anal sex with men?
Look,
Get out of your ivory tower, Karen.
How confused. She doesn't understand gay, does she?
How do you?
I don't think
Kara,
she
there's
gets
a
it.
lot she doesn't understand, clearly.
How does?
You know,
First off,
get your money back on that degree or whatever.
somebody has never. Where are the worms? Let me see the worms. Like,
Anal
can we see
worms.
it happen in a petri dish? Like, what is going on with
Oh,
this?
she's done studies.
Jay, here, she's done studies and she quote, this is science, nothing to be ashamed of. The sexual urge develops when a person is sexually attacked and afterwards persists because there is an anal worm that feeds on semen. You see.
How about this? Leave gay people the fuck
Yeah,
alone.
seriously.
How about that? Stop. I'm over it. At this, I would say it's really gotten to the point where this is absolutely insane.
Oh, this is
she should go to
madness.
prison for saying
This
shit
is
like that.
madness.
That is insane.
Yeah,
Well-
but Jay,
God.
so unfortunately, several Middle Eastern countries have laws still against homosexuals, and this sort of stuff is embraced
Well, and you may think
put
that
out
we
there by
are
the media.
obviously more progressive here, which to an extent we absolutely are.
That, I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah.
The American Psychological Association is very clear and has been for several decades in our ethics code that, what's it called? What's the therapy called? Conversion therapy. Yeah, the conversion therapy is unethical. But only in how many states is it illegal? Evan?
17 states have passed laws
Yeah, but
against it right
that's
now.
getting better.
It's getting
It-
better,
it's
but
totally
it's still,
changed.
it's still
Still
only
brutal.
illegal
Still
in
very brutal,
17 states.
I know, it's
Why
ridiculous
it's
when
not
you
all
think about
50
it.
is just,
And we have like candidates that run on those kinds of platforms. I mean, it's bananas.
In order to receive the treatment, you have to be conditioned, you see, nutritionally. You have to eat a diet of bitter foods to increase your masculinity. For the men, don't know about the butch lesbians. Bitter foods increase masculinity. Also, you want foods that are sour and a little bit salty. The ingredients for the cure are made the same for both sexes, so that answers your question, Jay. And they're color coded, so you can make sure that you don't put a female's one in the male and so forth.
They're color coded.
Because then it wouldn't work.
Totally.
I'm still really confused as to how a gay woman got a male anal sperm worm in her bum bum. And why she
Why would
needs
that make
to
her a
kill it.
lesbian?
Yeah, I'm so confused.
Yeah, it doesn't make
This
any
is
sense.
such a specific fetish for this stuff. It's like so.
I know.
How did she think about this?
That's what I mean. Like she obviously wants to stick
And the
stuff up
worms,
boys'
I
butts
guess-
and butch
You know what
lesbian.
could have happened
Sorry.
is that, like, I feel like this is one of those prime examples of the plural of anecdote is not data. She may have seen a patient once who had pinworms and who was gay, and she put those things
Yeah,
together
sure.
and said all gay men.
The worm's
have
feeding
worm.
on your
Y-
the
yeah.
sperm.
Yeah,
of
that's
your
called
worms.
delusion. That's
Yeah,
really
that's
delusional.
called, yeah.
She must
Jay,
think,
this is science. She said
Confirmation
so.
bias.
look, science. This is science. She said, and there are worms that do exist in our bodies.
Of course.
Obviously.
But I always
So-
take it too far because I'm like, okay, so what's happening? How does the freaking worm tell the person who is actually not gay to be gay? How does the worm actually
controls your
communicate
brain.
that?
Controls
Yeah,
your
so the
brain.
worms are now, the worms are controlling
It's
your
like
mind.
Mind control
toxoplasmosis.
parasitic worms.
Yeah.
There was a Futurama talked
so
about
stupid.
that very, very specifically.
Don't you just get violently angry when you read stuff
mean,
like
really.
this?
Of course.
It's
It's a
medieval.
massive human rights violation.
You know, if there was an anal worm that like gave me abs and great taste in clothing, I would shove it up there. I'd be like, give me two.
Yeah, but Jay,
Seriously.
I love George is saying this, the man with the best taste in clothing.
Oh, it's very sweet of you to
And
say that.
he
No,
wasn't
but I mean,
rude.
like, seriously, like, that's like oh,
It's
God.
lewd.
now, Jay, just as an aside, there are parasites that can affect cognition to certain degrees.
But none that make you
That's-
gay.
No,
So this
no,
is all plausible.
no. I'm just saying that is a fact. So
A
it's not.
sperm-eating, what'd you call it?
Buttworm.
A buttworm.
Oh, right?
Sperm worm.
Sperm-
Yeah.
A bumworm.
Right.
Anal sperm
Anal
worm.
sperm worm.
Sure,
that's
wonder why
ridiculous.
she thinks
But I'm
God
saying-
made the sperm-eating buttworm,
Exactly.
right?
What was that?
Why would God make a sperm-eating
Oh, right, yeah,
buttworm?
sure. Well, maybe Satan did.
Yeah.
Maybe Satan.
Or it was some sort of
Did
punishment.
he?
That's an easy answer.
Who's the enemy of Muhammad?
I mean, you know.
Me?
I want to know if Satan made the sperm-eating buttworm.
Yes.
Yes.
So
did I
we
not
have
notice that
this
shirt?
person who got
That's awesome.
a degree of some sort, from somewhere,
Oh, it was an honorary degree.
Yes.
who
Honorary.
concocts this idea, and then this is the
You said
truly
cock.
horrifying part. Other than it being wreaking havoc on people's lives, but the humorous thing is that there's people that believe it.
I wonder, yeah.
Of course.
It's one thing for one person to sit there and have a
Jay?
ridiculous delusion. Hey, George, and then you walk away like, yeah, there's
How about
sperm worms.
hundreds of millions of people believing this?
And imagine what it's like to be born and grow up in a society that doesn't accept who you are, and to think all day, every day, from your caregivers, from your friends, from religious leaders, that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Here's a
and
cure.
you may seek
Here's a
out
cure.
treatment
Yeah.
for it. I mean, it's,
You're evil.
And in some of these countries, you'll get
kids are-
beaten to death
yeah, these
before you
kids are
ever have a
brainwashed.
chance to escape that kind of.
That's
terrible.
Sick. That's really sick.
it's terrible.
Did you guys hear, sort of along this line about the Iranian chess player?
Yes.
Did you hear this story?
I didn't
So there was a
hear it.
woman who was playing for the Iranian chess team, and she apparently played without
The hijab.
the hijab, and I think like she showed her neck or something, and so they kicked her off the team.
Yep.
I'm not sure if she defected or how this worked, but she ended up on the American
Playing for the
team.
US
Yeah.
She's playing for the U.S. team, like
awesome.
with her shoulders bare, and she's
Nice.
kicking ass
Such
and
a
defeating her
great
former
She should-
former
she should-
teammates. It's the coolest thing. It's so cool.
You ever see pictures from the 60s of what that country looked like?
Oh, Iran, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Very
It's like,
progressive,
it's there are people alive that experience
super
like,
good. Right.
Under the Shah?
yeah, and it's
A lot of them live here, actually.
Was a
Right,
Western
right.
eye.
Yeah,
Yeah, the whole,
Yeah.
the whole Persian, they consider themselves Persian.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing of like, yeah, we're not Iranian, we're Persian.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, these types of news items, I'm irate. I can't calm down. I want to scream in that person's face.
And this gets broadcast to media outlets all over the Middle East and other
Right.
places, and they have no criticism otherwise.
Where was it
It's
again?
we in the
It's
West.
Kuwaiti?
Kuwaiti.
Kuwaiti, okay.
Terrible.
Let's move
So
on.
that's
I'm
what's
pissed
going
off
on in
now.
the
Go ahead,
rest of
George.
the
Make me
folks.
laugh.
Yeah, George, we're now up to the segment of the show where you ask us interesting questions.
Interesting questions.
I have no sperm worms.
Okay, so we've been like super fortunate, the 6 of us actually, that we have traveled to some amazing places. We've been to Australia, we've been to New Zealand, we were just in Manchester back in October. I think individually we've gone to all kinds of different places.
I leave for
Scotland.
Africa in like 2 days.
You leave for Africa
Yeah, I'm
in 2
going to
days.
Namibia.
Oh, Namibia. For what?
I'm giving a talk for the first half, and then I'm going on safari.
Wow. For how long?
I leave on Sunday, and I get back on the 11th.
Dig
so,
it.
I don't know, what is that, like 2 weeks? Something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Did-
I'm
did-
excited.
Namibia. What's happening in Namibia in terms of the conference? What's the conference?
It's a conservation conference. I'm going with a friend who is also speaking at the conference. He's really big into conservation, as am I, but he has dedicated most of his career to it. I'm going to talk about science communication there.
Okay.
But I'm also very excited because Namibia has the Big Five. So I had to look this up. Do you guys know what the Big
What's the Big
Five
Five?
game
No.
are? So think about what they could be, right?
Elephants.
Elephants,
Oh, game.
lions.
Zebra.
Tigers.
No, tigers are not in
They're
Africa.
Asian.
They're in Asia. Nope, not giraffe. You would think so, but no.
I thought giraffe.
This guy got it.
Wildebeest?
Rhinoceros, yes.
Hippos?
Buffalo, Cape
Oh,
buffalo.
Buffalo. Hippos, no.
And who's the
Bats.
last one? Leopard.
Leopard.
Yeah. It's not what you think, but I mean, it kind of is what you think. But
So you're
anyway.
going to bring one each back?
I'm
Like
gonna,
one of each?
no, absolutely not. But I'm very
carries
lucky. Namibia has all 5 of the Big Five game. That's not the case in many countries. We were going to do part of our trip in Mozambique, but unfortunately, after the cyclone hit, it's not very easy to travel in Mozambique right now. And the eco lodge that we're going to be involved with,
Okay.
is not doing well.
Well, that sounds awesome.
But yeah, we'll have a lot of fun. We're going to Etosha and Skeleton Coast, and it'll be
Represent.
Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah. Anyway.
Well, so we've traveled and we've had numerous experiences that have been really fantastic and unexpected sometimes. And I was wondering if you could each think about what is the one sort of particular experience that maybe you had. It might not have even been necessarily traveling any place, but it might have been at a performance or meeting someone or doing something that we have experienced because of the scientific outreach that we do. That was sort of unexpected. Like if you could talk to your high school self and say like, just so you know, in 20 years you're going to be, for me it was like being on stage with Bill Nye and him like laughing at a joke I said. Where the 17-year-old version of myself who watched Bill Nye just kind of went, like there was this moment, and that was Nexus a couple of years ago, and subsequently, like he knows who I am, and that's just. But that was this distinct, almost like a cognitive dissonance moment of like, how did this happen, or let alone being in Australia or being something like that. What are moments that you can think of that are sort of these like defining, like how the hell did I get here?
I have one.
Go for it.
And it doesn't involve travel, even though I've been
Yeah.
all over the world for science
Sure.
communication. And I was recently in Hong Kong, and went to China, and I recently got to spend like 2 weeks in Morocco, which was a lot of fun, and like kind of smaller towns, getting to know people. But I still think the thing that when you said, "How the hell did I get here?" Going to Stephen Hawking's private birthday party at Kip Thorne's house.
All right, give. How'd that
I mean,
happen?
how do you?
That's really
How'd that-
cool.
So
It's
explain.
Really cool.
You
Yeah.
found out something cool about him, too.
I wrote about him, and then Kip Thorne banned me from his house. So that was less cool.
So who's Kip
You
Thorne?
weren't supposed to.
Kip Thorne is one of Hawking's best friends. He recently just won a Nobel Prize. You guys remember?
Yeah.
Just a couple years ago now. So he's a Caltech physicist. And I wrote a story about Hawking that in my mind was actually very flattering, and it was very kind of deferential, but it was also very personal, because instead of writing about physics, I wrote about ALS. And I think it really humanized him in a way that Kip has always been, as his best friend, incredibly protective over Stephen. So I think that he was not a fan of how human he came out in the story, how fragile, really, because he was quite sick. I mean, he was at that point controlling his, speaking of brain-machine interfaces, the way that they work now is usually with a muscle. Some people do it eye tracking, but he had lost so much motor control that he would twitch in his cheek. There was one muscle that he could twitch, and so they had like a little sensor sitting on it, and that's how he would control his computer. But yeah, I sat with him for a while. We spoke. He said some sentences, and I wrote about it. It was really beautiful. It was raining. I think it was like Easter, around Easter, and it blew my mind. How did I get there? I'm not a physicist. I'm not,
Yeah, how did you get there?
Yeah. I'm trying
Why
to
did you-
remember.
Was it an
Who
invite?
else?
Was it like
It was
they
an
said?
invite.
So
I think it
so
was
who did you get the
Casey
invite from?
Cole or maybe it was Carol Tavris, but I think it was Casey Cole, who's a preeminent science writer.
Did
and
you read it like
professor at
30
USC.
times to make sure it said what you thought it said?
Yeah,
'Cause,
no,
like,
it was a verbal invite.
Oh,
And at
wow.
the time, I was actually dating a physicist at JPL, and he was with, with James Cameron on that ship when he was collecting
Yeah, that was
in the
that was-
Mariana
that was
Trench.
really
super
cool.
deep stuff, yeah.
But I was like texting him and bragging to him about how I was at Stephen Hawking's birthday party.
That's cool.
Who
No,
else
it
was there?
Amazing. Physicists. Like a lot of people I didn't recognize.
physicists,
Well, really,
Jane
it was
physicists,
just
other people.
there was only like 30 people there. It was
Wow.
like his grandson, family. His aide was with him. He has like an aide he did have an aide who would come with him different places. And yeah, just a lot of,
So-
they were all Caltech people. It was in Pasadena.
The interaction with him,
Mm-hmm.
how did that work? So you're sitting with him, or you're standing, he's sitting, obviously. And does it take, you sort of like take forever kind of deal?
Well, that's part of what I wrote about, and that's
Right.
part of what Kip was not pleased with, is that I wrote about how long it actually took him to
Sure.
produce speech. But the cool thing is when you sit next to him, he can produce speech on the screen, so he doesn't have to synthesize it. So
Okay.
he didn't use his voice when I
Right.
sat next to him, but he would write things. And I think the problem at the time that I realized was that he was very proud. And so instead of just, the way that the synthesizer works is it scrolls through all the alphabet, and then there are key words that it can start to produce. It's like predictive, like text,
Yeah.
right? But so he had the cursor scroll so fast that he kept missing letters. And it's like, he probably could have turned it down. I think he probably just didn't want to. You know what I mean? 'Cause he's probably a little proud.
Right,
Well,
right.
He's impatient because
And
of
impatient,
condition,
yeah. But the
I
problem is it
blame him.
actually made it take a lot longer.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, it was
All
really
right,
neat.
party at Hawking's, who can top that? What do we got, boys?
I can't top that.
Should have saved her for last. just saying.
Sorry.
I think the most unexpected thing that we did recently that I would never have guessed would come out with this was being consultants for the CIA.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that
Which I know some people in our audience don't like that because they don't like the CIA, but whatever. They're a legitimate government organization, and that's, we have, I think, a legitimate purpose as skeptics to both learn how they operate and to also, introduce critical thinking from our perspective, which is,
Yep.
what they were looking for. So it was fascinating. So it was good to be able to talk to CIA officers and people, as far as you get on the inside. And
Well, let's back up. How did this happen? Did they get in touch with you?
They
Did you reach
contacted
out?
us and said, "Hey, we'd like to have you guys come down to Langley."
What do they say? We've heard of you. We've listened to your show. You
Oh,
were
they were like
recommended by
fans.
someone
There's a handful
else.
of
and-
fans.
I think
Yeah.
they're
Also,
opening-
individuals have listened.
Actually, the guy said, "I'm watching you right now. Do not turn to the left."
He stole
You
my
have something
joke.
in your teeth.
I was going to say their first words were, "We know what you've done."
Yeah, that laser just.
It was very humbling. I mean, it's funny because you say this a lot in your show, George. There's always a version of yourself that's still the teenager.
That's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, I don't know how to put this. Like, I don't have a big ego attached to this. Like, I work very hard to do this. It's now what I do for a living. It's next to my wife and my kids and my family. Like, this is the most important thing I have going on in my life. But I try to be as humble as I can.
Sure.
Like, I don't walk into the CIA and be like, "Yeah, goddamn right." I walk in there and I'm like, "Whoa, like what? Why am I here? How the hell does a guy like me end up there?" And it really is. There's a lot of skeptics out there, and our friend in the CIA is a listener of the show, and he's a skeptic. He's a real skeptic.
Well, and it wasn't just him. Like when we went to that conference.
Oh
room,
yeah, there was three.
There was a bunch of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was three. There was more than three, I think. But we made contact with these people, and to me the humbling thing about going to the CIA was it wasn't talking to people in the CIA. I was talking to fellow skeptics.
Yeah.
Which was really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's my thing. Like, it wasn't the CIA. It's just the camaraderie that we have. Like, I'm friends with Iran in Australia and Richard Saunders, and we're friends with people. I mean, the commonality that we have because of skepticism is like, it's glue. It's really cool. And I'm watching people on the SGU Discord, and I'm seeing people from all over the world talk to each other and hang out and have meals with each other and play. Talk. It's just we just have this thing in common that makes it a
But
global
Jay, don't they
community.
also produce their own podcast?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have an internal podcast.
Which only people within the CIA
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
access
it's
It's
an
a
internal-
classified podcast.
it's an
and we were
internal-
guests
So
on
they're
it.
podcasters as well.
Yeah.
So they weren't asking for podcast
No, they
consultation.
They asked for a
Oh, they
lot
were?
of advice.
They were
Okay.
asking us for just a skeptical feedback.
Right.
And they also were there to, it was also partly PR for them.
Yeah.
Like they were
Sure.
using us
Sure.
as a PR outlet,
Gotcha.
no question about that. They
Gotcha.
were like, ask us questions. We'll, give you the show and
Yeah.
we'll tell you stuff. But then they also literally consulted with us about podcasting.
Okay.
It's like, okay, like why are you asking us? Aren't you like the CIA? Like, don't you have like millions of dollars at your disposal? But apparently, people in the CIA could pick up pet projects like this, and they're like, yeah, go ahead and do that. We're not going to give you any money or anything, but go ahead and do that if
right.
you
Make
want
it happen,
to.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
he did ask us once if money were no option.
Yeah, he said, give us the cheapest way we could get this done, and then give us the money is no object way. So that tells us, so either they're going to get no funding or someone's going to be like, yeah, here's $20 million.
There was no like, all right, so we're
Somewhere
gonna get
in
about
between.
10 grand.
Yeah, there's no in between. It was like either it's going
That's
to be
crazy.
real or it's just like they're like on a shoestring budget.
George, to further answer your question, though, they are interested in producing a podcast for the public.
Yeah.
As
Which
well.
we think will be a great idea.
Right.
But
So
they're classified podcasts. Do you remember what it's called?
No,
Yeah,
we can't even
can't
say it.
We can't say
No.
it?
No.
I thought we just couldn't show
No,
the...
we can't say it. We can't talk
But
about it.
the
It's easy to guess.
You told
they're
people,
listening
didn't you,
right now,
Karen?
though.
Yeah, I totally told my friends.
But no, they're going to do an unclassified. They're going to do an unclassified version for the public.
Steve, cut that in editing.
That's right. Yeah.
Who's that in the balcony?
Oh, hold on, Kara, wait 1 second. What? Okay, yeah. All right, they want you to go outside.
Are you a CIA officer now?
So paint me a picture of like you guys all drove down together, I assume. Or
Well, I flew,
You
but
flew
yeah.
out, so you met there, and like so you're outside. This is Langley, or this
Yeah,
is
Langley.
so like this is like the thing with on the floor where it
Yeah.
says
Yes.
They took a
Central
picture of us.
Intelligence,
The
right?
iconic
The icon thing
Yeah.
with that.
And the stars.
You
What's
can't
his
bring your
name?
phone, so they did
Yeah.
like a special photo.
But like so you're outside the building, and like what happens?
Well, first you drive down, and there's a separate entrance for guests. So all the people that work there,
Right.
they're lined up, and they
Okay.
have all the fencing and the guards.
Yeah.
And they're driving through.
We got our badges.
So yeah, so there was almost no guests when we went. We just park and we walk in, and they knew who we were.
you
but Jay,
walk into a thing, and it's like
Yeah.
We're
got
issued
something-
badges at the
That's
garage.
something
At
very
the garage,
interesting.
yeah.
When they line up to queue in to the building, they will always have a good separation between cars because of a
because of an
horrible thing
incident, yeah.
that happened. And I think it was in the 90s. They were all lined up, ready to go in one by one, and somebody got out of the car with a gun and started killing
Yeah, and they just started shooting a line
Employees,
of
yeah.
CIA
Employees.
employees. So now they always like park a few feet away so that for a worst case scenario, they could just like pull out and leave really fast. So
Yeah,
that's
you're
like
right.
a crazy story that they
So
told.
did you notice this before you knew what the deal
No,
was?
no,
and everything?
no, I didn't
Oh,
notice
oh, they explained it.
They
Okay.
told us that when they were telling us about the stars, the book.
Yeah,
I don't know if
right.
you've seen the book, and it has the stars next
yeah.
to all the fallen.
Right.
And sometimes there's no name because it's not declassified yet.
So the guy that's giving you your badges and stuff, is he like? Can you tell this is a badass, or is it
No,
just
it's
like
just a
an
guard.
executive? Like this is just a
Yeah,
guy
but you know what?
guard.
It's
No, it's
technology.
like a toll booth
because
operator.
we
It's just like a guard.
All right.
They-
But they're locked down. There's like no.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're behind the bulletproof glass.
Everything is like they need this identification. Like I don't have your name on the list. Like, we're not going anywhere until
Right.
they've cleared every single one of us.
Your badge has your social, and you have to punch in your social
Yeah.
every time you go
Okay.
through.
And you have a sponsor in the building, so they're like, did you invite these people? And like they already know because we're already
Yeah.
in the system. They
Yeah.
know they already know who we are before we
No, they
walk
gotta
in
lock
there.
down.
Oh yeah, you have to
Okay,
be
so
escorted
you get
to the bathroom.
you get past that guy, and
Yeah.
you're driving, or you're walking in, or whatever, and then like the first person you meet that is your official sort of
guy.
He
liaison,
was
your
kick
guy.
ass. I mean, the
You're-
guy,
if you're-
So what's this guy
In
like?
that foyer.
the main
area.
guy in military gear, he would just take your head off. He was like definitely a guy.
Where, who was this?
The guy that was sitting behind the desk.
Oh, the internal guard.
the internal guard.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no,
Okay, so that's like a
no.
badass. But your guy, would you if you had to put him in a lineup of like, this guy probably works for the CIA.
I
No,
you'd
military.
never
Yeah,
know.
military.
I don't think you'd
Military.
ever know though, because
All
he
right.
was wearing like jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah, but
and
he
he
had
had
wow.
like
He had a
an
total military.
he had like a Marvel.
Yeah, he was casual. They're
Like
casual in
his
there.
his thing that has his badge was
Yeah.
like Groot or something.
Oh, okay.
You remember that Marvel?
But I think they funnel most of the people that
I
go
am
there.
spook. Yeah.
You go into the marble
Nice.
foyer. It's the big one that
Right.
you've seen pictures and
Yeah.
presidents and everything going on in there.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is like just in the foyer alone, like you have to like take it in because there's a lot of stuff. First,
Right.
the seal, this gigantic
Yeah.
seal.
In marble on the floor.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And then they explain the stars, right? They hand carved. There's 2 people in the world that have hand carved stars into the wall that represent fallen CIA agents.
Right. This is on the
It's a
wall.
man and his son. When he died, his son took it over. It was like a stonemason.
And they're perfect. You just look like
very-
5-pointed stars.
When,
And then they
when
go
they
through-
come and they do it like people will. It's an
ceremony.
event.
It's
It's
a
a
big
deal.
ceremony
Okay,
when they.
yeah.
A real big deal.
So they have the book of all the fallen agents, and it was so
Officers.
cool. The officers, I'm sorry,
They're
you're right.
not
It's
called
hard-
agents.
Not
My
agents.
whole,
They
it's
really
a whole
drilled
life
that into
of like saying.
Why not
that-
agents?
Hollywood poison.
They're not CIA.
Why,
they're
why,
not
are they,
CIA
why not
officers. I
agents?
have no
Did
idea.
they,
Just Hollywood got it wrong,
Hollywood
and
thing,
therefore
okay.
the world got it wrong.
wow, so they're officers but not agents.
And they don't have badges and they don't carry a gun, a weapon.
Yeah.
Not in the CIA.
No, not in that building. Those people are analysts. Most of
Right.
like,
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
Jack Ryan kind of.
Well, didn't their own guards not carry weapons? There was
no.
something.
No, they had
They had
weapons.
weapons. But remember, they said something about like, if there's a thing that the local police have to come.
Well, they're not police.
Because, they're not law enforcement. So FBI has
Right.
law enforcement privileges,
Right.
but CIA doesn't. And
Okay.
so
That's
nobody's like armed there.
So you're walking through the hallways. Is it loud? Is it busy? Is it bush? Is it very?
not
Is it
loud.
like a
It's
mausoleum?
quiet.
It's a corporate
It
office
feels very
environment.
corporate. It has like a big
corporate.
food court
Corporate.
with a coffee bean and a Starbucks.
They do have
And there's
that.
like a fight between who
Yeah,
eats
there's
at which one.
Dunkin' Donuts people and Starbucks people.
Yeah.
And they literally, like, what they'll do is, like, if you're a Dunkin' Donuts person, you'll call a meeting and go, I'll meet you by Dunkin' Donuts.
Right.
And they laugh because it's like, oh, you're a Dunkin' Donuts person. Well, I'm a Starbucks person.
Right.
And they get, there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah.
Oh, and
But
there's a gift
the-
shop.
Oh, there's the
Oh, we
CIA
totally.
gift shop.
I have a
I've never
CIA
bought
mouse
that.
pad.
I drink my coffee out of a CIA coffee mug now.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, there's a sign next to when you check out that says that officers can't use a credit
Credit
card.
cards.
Yeah, to
Right.
purchase there because it'll
That's right.
show that they work at the CIA, and they're not allowed to say that. Oh, the ones that are undercover
Right.
can't have been at Langley.
There's like weird things they can't do because it could theoretically be
Traced to
traced
them.
back to them.
Because a lot of them are undercover.
Yeah.
Like some of them told us their parents don't know what they do.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
they were
And
they
the
were
names
girls
they-
like my age, and
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, my parents don't.
I had a very good friend. I spoke about him years ago. Andy, a guy passed away a couple of years back, and he was an analyst, a total secret thing, and like it wasn't until he was out of Afghanistan that he could like even remotely say, yeah, I was an analyst, kind of thing, you know.
Right.
And I had a trillion questions for him because it's all this kind of stuff, and so yeah, it's amazing that the dual life.
Well, the one woman
yeah.
was so
It's
funny. She
off.
said that like she doesn't tell her parents what she does for a living, but when she tells people that she can't tell them what she does for a living, they're immediately like, "So you work for the CIA?"
So, right, yeah, yeah.
But then she's like, they don't actually believe that,
Right,
but that's
right.
everybody's joke.
Yeah.
And so that must be such
We
a
don't even
weird
know if the
experience.
names they gave us are their real names.
No, yeah, we don't.
Probably
We don't
not.
think.
Wow.
And they were all
Probably not.
first names. They didn't give us
Yeah,
last
the first
names.
name only, no last name.
Yeah.
I found it interesting too. Like we met some analysts that were older, or some people that work for the CIA, and they're really good. You feel like, oh, they're talking very comfortably, but they're very adept at quickly editing and filtering out stuff they can't say. And two of the people that we met who were younger, when you ask them a question, there's this going, they're going, well,
Right.
you get that,
Edit,
and they're
edit,
just,
edit, edit,
you
yeah.
You
get
can see
the
they're
direct
editing in real time.
Wow,
And
okay.
they're slow at
But
it.
the older ones were just like, hey, what's up? Yeah, okay, cool, I'll answer that question. And it was like
Yeah.
no pause because they're just good at it.
Good, like muscle memory
Yeah.
of like,
Been
no,
doing
you
it
just
for so
don't
long.
mention
And I told them,
locations
don't
and-
tell me any secrets because I'm horrible with secrets. Like, don't say
And they're like, "Don't
You didn't
worry,
have to
we
tell
weren't
them.
planning on it."
Thanks for letting us know, Jay.
If people have given us any criticism for our now relationship, I guess you can say, with the CIA, I kind of come back with them at this, like, okay, then which podcast would you prefer that they reach out to sort of
Yeah.
on this endeavor? I mean, you should have some level of comfort that they actually reached out to us, I think, rather than who knows what kind of
Yeah.
podcast they
Yeah,
reached
being
out to.
interviewed by them or interviewing them does not mean that we fundamentally approve of every single action that has ever been taken by the CIA.
We're not helping them knock over governments or something. You know, we're just trying to get
No, if
information.
anything, I looked at it like we are interfacing with the critically minded people. Well, first off, it is a very critically minded organization,
Yeah.
but these are like the cream of the crop critical thinkers
right.
because they're lessened in it. You know, they
The
are.
vast majority of people who work there are, PhD level scientists. There are also a lot of ex-military, but that's like that. Those are CIA
Skilled people.
Yeah,
They're skilled
officers are.
people.
They're scientists, mathematicians, engineers. All right,
It was really cool.
All right, give me another. Someone, Bob, anybody, give me a
Sure.
Yeah.
For me, if I could talk to myself 20 years ago, I would say buy Google stock, buy Facebook. That's the things I would focus on. But if after a while, I would say going to see Weta in New Zealand for me was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
I love visual effects. I love costuming. I love makers. I'm a prop builder. For Halloween, I'm always building stuff. So to see professionals really do this stuff. It blew me away.
So Weta is the Lord of the Rings. They do all the special
They
effects for
do
Lord
all
of the
the,
Rings.
yeah,
They
they've
do-
done visual effects and special effects for tons of movies, more than you even know.
District
and
9.
They are amazing. So you're walking around, it's like Disney World, and we're going very fast, and you can't take pictures. So I was dying because there was so many things I wanted to take a picture
You
of.
also have to sign like 3 NDAs.
NDAs,
before
so
you
many
Can we
go
say
in.
this?
things I
Can we say this? Like, are we?
Yeah.
We can say that. We can say we had to sign NDAs.
We
We're not supposed to say what we
can't
saw.
say that we got the super secret behind the scenes tour that they're not supposed to give people.
So we can't say
We
that.
can't
So
say
we
that.
couldn't say
We
that.
saw things that,
And we
Also,
saw things that we're not
You
supposed
guys
to say.
went, I went just last year or 2 years ago. When did you guys
Like
go?
2 years
14
You guys went
years
like 4
ago.
years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're going again this fall.
Oh, nice.
This fall.
They're so nice.
So that was that was
but-
amazing.
But
Everybody
here's
there
the
is
thing. It's
so
like, so
nice.
yeah, so we're walking through this. I mean, it's acres and acres of building of just sword makers and model
Costume
makers and
designers,
costume
yeah.
designers, and they're working on these actually these huge World War I figures where like a World War I soldier's boot is like this, but it's completely lifelike. So it's these massive giants, and we're like walking by this stuff, and everyone is incredibly generous and cool, and they have all these things set up where you have to sort of, not only do you have to work, are you supposed to work on the stuff you're supposed to work on, but then in your free time you can do whatever you want because you have this facility of lathes and saws and laser chalk and whatever they have. It's like insane the amount of stuff they have. So everybody also has their own creative stuff that they're making. So, oh, this is a sword that I made for, you know, the second Lord of the Rings movie, and here are just these like robots I made, and this guy's named Fred, and he can't say the word the. So, you know, and you're like, so these creative endeavor. And here's the 6 of us walking through, and we've signed this release, and 6 people that basically talk for 1 to 2 hours a week about everything they experience. We're not allowed to say a word of this to anybody. And we're like, like trying to remember it, but you can't remember because you can't talk about it.
pictures, not-
It was like, it was the coolest and yet most torturous thing too,
Yeah.
of like, because we could probably talk for 5 hours
you
about
want
what
to
we saw.
share every
There was,
bit
I
of
mean, there
that
were the
experience.
public-facing parts.
Yeah.
Right,
We could
right.
talk about those.
We talked
and
about
take
that,
a
yeah.
few
The
pictures.
general tour.
Yeah. And then I was really lucky. I went just with my boyfriend. I was in New Zealand. Wasn't with. I wasn't on the SGU
No,
when you guys
no.
went.
It was right before.
And so we got invited by David and another gentleman, and they were just so kind. One of them
a person, yeah.
tooled, like he was a metal worker, and he made me a necklace and gave it to me. And one of them made a Lord of the Rings figurine from the artist, and they all signed it and gave it to me. And my favorite was they gave me a book from District 9, which is my absolute favorite. And a lot of the concept artists drew and wrote all in the front
That's
page,
awesome.
and they
God,
drew
that's
the
fun.
aliens. And so
Wait,
it
they
was
treated
super
you a
cool.
lot better than they treated us.
It was a smaller tour, I don't know, but it was so fun.
because
I bought Christmas presents out the wazoo from that gift shop.
Yeah, oh God, their swag is like, their stuff is,
My mom and her husband are like really into the Ren Fair, really into
Yeah,
the Ren Fair,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
like hooked them up.
But now we are, Bob, Jay, and I are building a phaser rifle with a maker at Weta. And we're designing
very
it with
cool.
them.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like
And
legit.
we will be able to talk about that.
yes.
Cool.
Yeah, we're
That's
gonna-
for
How
our,
did that-
that's
how did
for
that
our
happen?
science fiction review show. Well, I maintained a friendship with David Tremont at Weta after we met him. He was like the guy that brought us in, and
He's the SGU listener.
it
And
just
he's
turns
so
out
great.
that we have, I want to say we have a lot in common. We have a lot of fun things in common, and we chit chat with each other every once in a while. So he contacted us, and one thing he did was he sent me a picture of this awesome Star Wars rifle I've never seen. And he goes, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "Well, I think that's about 300 years before Movie 4. Looks like something that would have been built in the Outer Rim." I'm just analyzing. I'm like, yeah, I'm just looking. It looks kind of spare party and all that. And he goes, "Oh my God, you're right." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a fan, man, And he goes, "I was on vacation and I had nothing to do, so I built it and I'm going to send it to you." And I was like, "What? Are you kidding me?" Like he literally deconstructed it and sent it to me.
Jay, what is it called, the thing that he does where he pulls parts from model kits?
He raids model kits.
Yeah, there's like a name for that, like for people who...
What's it called? Kit
Kit
bashing.
bashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a professional kit basher. Like,
Well, he fabricates too.
yeah,
he
but like
fabricates.
he'll kit bash, and then those things will end up in movies,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
is
yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool.
So
Yeah.
then from him doing that, because I think he literally wanted to offload it on someone because he didn't want it. He wanted to build, but he didn't want it. And of course, I'm just like, I'm still humbled by it. Like, why did I get to have this? So anyway, I mean, I appreciate that on a level. I can't even like, oh my God. It's like I collect blasters, you know? Like he sent me something better than anything I could ever have hoped
Right.
to own, you know? So anyway,
As a
then
gift.
we were chit-chatting, and I'm telling him about Alpha Quadrant 6, and I'm like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I want to help you guys with when you hit 4,000 patrons, you're going to have this 12-hour live thing, which you know you're going to be involved in some manner, right?
Okay.
You know that? Yeah.
Sign here.
And it just turned into this conversation where he's like, well, I mean, let's build just a classic Star Trek phaser rifle. And then it turns into, sure, that'd be cool. He's like, well, you know, you guys, it kind of became a collaboration. Then it became a real collaboration. Then it became like, we made a mock-up of it. Like I downloaded all these drawings, and I took out little pieces and doodads and stuff digitally and kind of assembled this thing that I thought would be a cool prototype idea. And then Steve and Bob iterated it, and then we send it to him, and he's like, we're doing it.
Is it going to light up and like the whole thing? And,
Oh, yeah. And then
the
he's
whole
He's
deal.
already sent us Generation 1 mock-up of the phaser rifle, but it's basically just cardboard.
Yeah.
So it was, like, he was funny. He sent us a picture of, like, I got the whole idea. And it's a picture of him with literally like cardboard pieces glued together.
Terrible. It
But
looked
it's
like
just to show the
Amazon
shape
box.
of it.
Shirt
Yeah, but
size.
that's how
where you-
artists work. You
that's
start
where
with the
you
rough
start,
shapes, and then
is
you
in the shape.
sculptor.
So what's going to happen with that is he's going to make 3 of them, and we're giving one away to
nice.
our patrons.
Yeah.
So someone's going to somehow win it.
lucky,
We haven't figured out exactly what it's going to be.
Right.
And I think the person that wins it is also going to probably have to join us at the set when we do the 12-hour show,
Okay.
which I'm hoping is going to be at the Star Trek Museum in upstate New York. And you should really,
Yes.
yeah, it's going to be
Very cool.
Jay's very excited about
Yeah,
this.
I
He talks
can-
about it at least once every show.
Yeah.
More often than that.
Yeah, at
All
least
right.
once.
Much
Before we
more
do that,
Yes.
we've been sitting for a while, so let's just all stand up for a second.
wanna
Just stand up for a
stand
second.
My fitness
Just stand up for a
tracker
second.
just
Just
told
to
me
do a little thing.
Good.
Just to do a little stretchy stretch, just for a second. I know it's a lot to ask you guys.
We're
to
not
stretch.
the best shape community. You're like probably the most fit person.
I
in
don't
the
know about
skeptical
that. I wouldn't say that necessarily. I wouldn't say I'm the most. I wouldn't say that I'm the most fit person. I'm okay. I do
Yeah.
all right.
That was it?
Okay.
Makes a difference. Just make sure everybody.
Is there something that,
That's all.
no?
That's all.
Okay.
Okay, a little blood movement.
It's just a little blood movement, and I get to do some lunges, so we're all good.
Sorry.
Science or fiction?
Well, we're going to move on with science or fiction.
Yay!
Each week I come up with 3 science news items or facts, 2 real and 1 fake, and I challenge my panel of skeptics to tell me which one is the fake. We have a theme this week. George, what do you think the theme is?
Handsome drummers.
Bethlehem?
Almost went with that.
Is it Bethlehem?
Is it
It's Bethlehem.
Bethlehem? Very well. Like properly said. Wonderful. Yay. Ooh, Bethlehem.
Or
Ooh,
Bethlehem.
I
So
better do
George
well.
goes last.
I better do well. Yeah.
Yes, George will last.
Okay.
So here they are. You ready?
Yes.
3 items
Here we
about
go.
Bethlehem. So there are 39 cities in the world with the name Bethlehem, 28 of them in the U.S. Number 2, the original Bethlehem in the Middle East has a mostly Christian population today, but is under Israeli control.
Sorry.
And item number 3, Bethlehem, PA, was founded on Christmas Eve, 1741, by David Nishman and Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf.
You had to make that name up.
Zinzendorf.
Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf.
All right,
What?
we're just going to go down this way.
Wait, aren't you going to poll the audience first?
Yes. Before that, I'm going to poll the audience. George, you're going to do your 1 clap.
So yeah,
thing.
so we do a single clap. So let's just practice 1 clap together. When my hand gets to the ictus, which is what it's called in conducting, we're going to all clap together. So let's practice. Ready? 1 clap. All together. Ready? All together. Okay, that's how you vote. So
Okay, so if you think that the 39 cities is the fiction, clap.
39, not true. Okay.
If you think that the Bethlehem being under Christian, being Christian but under Israeli control.
And I feel like it's got to be true because it's
This
so
town
ridiculous.
does this town does Christmas big. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so, well, I mean, it's
of course,
Bethlehem,
but
exactly.
It's a big,
You mean,
big day.
it's Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, yes.
But the original Bethlehem in the Middle East has a mostly, I bet you it's mostly
Yes.
is Jewish population. So
Right.
that's what I'm going to say. That's the fiction.
Okay, Jay.
All right, when I first heard the one about 39 cities in the world, I mean, there's a lot of repeat names, especially between New England and England.
And Old England.
But coincidentally, I did a Google search Bethlehem recently for looking for a movie theater, and lots of shit came up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess that one's true. I agree with what Kara said. Like, what could be wrong here? The second one here about the Middle East has mostly Christian population today, but is under Israeli control. There's something about that is rubbing me the wrong way. Like, is it mostly Christian population? Man, I just don't know. That's hard. I just don't have the geography in my head. Excuse me. The last one, Bethlehem, PA. Found on Christmas Eve. Yeah, no, this is like, really? And from my, perspective, these are rare names. But back in 1741, you're going to have names that are going to be foreign because a lot of people were coming from Europe. David Nietzschmann and Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf. What does von mean?
From.
Of?
From.
Yeah.
FRO.
So it would be Count Rob von Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, I'm going to go with the second one. Middle East has a mostly Christian population for that line right there.
Okay, Evan?
Okay, I will agree that the one for Bethlehem in the Middle East being the fiction. Bethlehem is in the Middle East, mostly Christian population. I don't think so. Under Israeli control, no. It's in the West Bank, is it not? And is that not under control of the Palestinian Authority?
Exactly.
I believe that is fiction.
Interesting.
Exactly.
I feel I should recuse myself because I know for a fact that one of these is correct. Is that okay?
Two of them are
Is
correct.
that okay?
No, that's fine. That's
Just don't ruin it for them.
George.
All right.
Take your
Remember,
chance at not
two of them
losing
are
this
correct.
time.
So I'm going to agree with Evan that the Middle East Bethlehem, there's something fudgy in
Yes.
there
Did we
in
just
terms
sweep
of its.
Steve?
I don't know. We might have swept because
Somebody's being swept.
I could see that being yes.
See, the fact
there
that
will be
Steve is
sweeping.
smiling is not cool.
All right. Let's see what influence you had over the audience.
Okay.
George.
All right.
So
If you change
now
your
what
order.
do you think? The 39 cities, is that the fiction?
Oh, that one
One
got
guy.
Interesting.
Bethlehem being mostly Christian?
Wow.
And von Zinzendorf.
Yeah, you're about
One guy.
Swayed the hell
That was
out of
one
that.
person
All
that
right.
double clapped.
All right.
All right.
Don't blame me for all.
Well, wait. Now, before you get to the finish line here,
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that if you are wrong,
Yeah.
this is the first time that virtually everyone in the room except two people
Yes.
are going to sweep you.
This would be the cleanest sweep
Yes, of all time
in a
ever.
live show.
Well, it'll be the cleanest sweep either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, either way, that's,
Yeah.
who
That's
knew you
true.
were
So
so
dirty, Steve.
That is correct. All right, we'll start.
Smiling.
We'll take them in order.
Oh wait.
Wait for George.
I think he wants you to wait.
When you gotta go.
He's got to pee.
George, you're mic'd.
Yes, that bathroom over to the right is closer.
He's mic'd.
But who's going to get to use it?
That's true.
All right. Item number one, there are 39 cities in the world with the name Bethlehem, 28 of them in the U.S. Virtually everyone, except for one guy, thinks that this one is science, and this one is science.
All right. There it is.
I found a list. I counted them. That's how
Wow.
many there are. It's actually, I thought there would be more.
Yeah.
I counted it too, but then I was like, maybe not 290.
How many are pronounced Bethlehem?
Probably just the one.
That's right. The
Okay,
real one.
Got it.
All right.
real
Don't
one.
need to- There's not even. It's not even that interesting. Let's move on.
I know, but should have made that one to think of. All right, number two, the original Bethlehem in the Middle East has a mostly Christian population today, but it's under Israeli control. Virtually all of you think this one is the fiction.
Say it, brother.
And
Say
this
it.
one
Say it.
is the fiction. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Evan is correct.
In the West Bank.
It's in the West Bank. It's
Nicely
under
done.
Palestinian
Palestinian.
authorities.
Okay.
But also, its population is mostly Muslim.
Muslim.
Oh wait.
Yeah,
so
it's Palestinian.
why didn't you say I was correct?
Did you say Muslim?
I just said that.
I said Evan was correct.
Yes,
Well,
he was.
Evan's reasoning was the correct reason.
Yes. It's a both. I made both things wrong
Okay.
to make it easy. I was thinking
Yes,
of
but
doing
who
one or
gets
the
it
other.
right?
Oh, to make it easy.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
to make it easy.
That's right.
Retro
You have no,
dad.
you have no advantage.
Clear.
No, it was 2
Yeah.
and 3 were kind of like.
So, Bethlehem, right in the middle of the Middle East there, has been a very contentious city over its very, very long history.
Yep.
And it's, been under various control. Most recently, Muslim. And it is now under Palestinian authority. There is a Christian church in Bethlehem.
I'm sure.
And there are 3 denominations which share it, and it's supposed to be the literal birthplace of Jesus, like the
manger?
yeah, where he was born. So they just comfortably, I think it's Greek Orthodox, Catholic, and one other one, which I can't remember.
Do you know the ladder story?
The what? The ladder?
The ladder in that particular church.
No, I don't
Someone in the 16th century put a ladder someplace where it wasn't supposed to be. One of the factions of the church put a ladder against a wall that wasn't their wall.
Yeah.
And for the last 400 years or whatever it is, they've basically been saying, move your ladder. And they're like, no.
Why don't
Still
they?
there.
So like they don't want to cross over into the side that they're not supposed to be on, or to sort of
retrieve it?
to retrieve it, and the ones on whose it's leaning against don't want it.
They have to be unanimous to do anything.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, right.
Oh, okay, that makes,
But literally, this thing has been sitting there for 300 years, 400. Like it's centuries. This
because
ladder.
they can't
There's a
agree.
picture of it from 1860.
Okay, right. Has been sitting in
we
the
gotta
same
go
spot.
there.
I can handle it.
Grab the ladder.
That's what I mean.
Ladder,
It's like religions will never get along. We will never get along. Like in terms of that. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
George, we just have to educate them.
That's true. That's true. That's true. You're right. You're right.
Talk to them respectfully.
Yes,
Yes.
one JAMA article.
They'll get rid of
That's just move your ladder, please.
That's
That's my
amazing.
ivory tower.
All right. Number 3, Bethlehem, PA was founded on Christmas Eve, 17. Yishman and Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf. You knew that.
This is like the #1 tourist fact when you start any tour in Bethlehem for any reason. It's like, did you know Bethlehem was named Christmas Eve? It's like, yeah, that's the thing.
Who were these people? What do you know?
So
about
Count von Zinzendorf was what's now the Czech region. He was one of the early Moravians.
He was a Moravian.
Yeah, so the early Moravians came over. And the Moravians actually, I've talked about this on my show and I've written about this. The Moravians were exceedingly progressive. So Count von Zinzendorf, also Comenius, who was a scholar and educator. This is stuff going to, again, 17th, 18th century. They believed that women should have educations. They should be able
that's
to
great.
read books and learn things.
Educate the ladies.
Educate the ladies. They believed that not only was education of the mind important, but education of the body. So physical activity was important. They had this, one of my favorite spots here in Bethlehem, and if you do get a chance, go check it out. It's called God's Acre. And it's not even half a mile from here. It's up off of Main Street. And it's a graveyard. And what the Moravians were really big about was they believed in that in death and in life we're all equal in God's eye, and only God can sort of affect the landscape and make monuments to someone, with a mountain, with a sunset, with whatever. So as you look at this graveyard, it's about 1.5 acres, I think. It's totally flat, so it just looks like a field if you're looking at it from the side. And as you approach it from the front, you realize that every tombstone is flat on the ground. So you have these little flat, they're all the same size. And people were buried in the order they died. So which was interesting because what does that mean?
Reasonable, right?
No, what does that mean? So
Better
better be
burying them
that.
out of order.
well, no, but like, so you literally have,
But I mean,
in a 17th century graveyard, you have an Indian, a Native American, buried next to a preacher, which was unheard of.
And they're just all in chronological order.
And then women were allowed to be buried with their maiden names. So to extend their family name.
And they didn't use suppositories for anything.
For anything. For anything. So the Moravians were pretty hip in terms of that. And so it was a miserable Christmas Eve. And at the time, they had just they were going through really rough patch. And Zinzendorf and the mayor, the other guy's name, who was the mayor at the time, Nitschmann, was just like, let's call it Bethlehem. And it was like, yay. And they felt good for like 20 minutes and they realized, but that's a major big story. So Zinzendorf, the Moravian College, which is here, it's all Zinzendorf Hall and Zinzendorf Sandwich and Zinzendorf this and Zinzendorf that.
Yeah, but did he say let's call it Bethlehem or let's call it Bethlehem?
Yeah, I wonder, in German, or the sort of Czech, I don't know, it wasn't quite German, wasn't quite Czech, wasn't quite whatever language they were speaking. I wonder what the actual pronunciation is.
Does anybody speak any of those languages here?
In German? What's Bethlehem in German? Does anybody know? Bethlehem.
There's a
So
hard
it's
him in there.
yeah, it's
Wrong. Yeah. So there it is.
cool.
And they did that. They named the town. It's right where the Hotel Bethlehem is on the corner. It's just right there. They had a little gathering house. And it's right there. It's really cool. A lot
They
of
should
history
have called
in
it
this place.
Zinzenden.
Zinzenton.
Zinzenberg.
Zinzenberg.
Zinzendorf-Vinton.
Bethlehem. And then at Christmas, it's really lovely. So
Yeah.
Okay.
sweep.
That was cool.
Sweep.
You okay, Steve?
I'm good.
Love it. I
I
love it.
swept you guys last week, so I'm balancing. I'm
That's
doing
just because I wasn't there.
Thanos has to balance.
That's right. Yeah.
Not in front of.
Touche.
Okay.
Science
I'll
with
edit it so
Thanos.
it'll be fine.
Okay.
They were all wrong. Who knew? All right.
Now what?
Yellow.
It's relatives of Zinzendorf. You're saying the town hall. It's Bethlehem.
Should we do like one question before because you literally have 8 minutes?
question?
Then before we do the quote.
Does anybody want to ask us a
audience?
question?
Oh, yeah.
Is there anybody who has a burning question
quick.
in the audience for us?
Nobody.
This is
No.
Right, you in the red
you're-
shirt.
Here we go. Really good one.
Come up here so somebody can shove a microphone in your face.
Well, so thank you. I guess what can we do to utilize the knowledge that you guys have kind of imparted on us in many ways? Look at the impact that you've had. So what can we do in kind of going off and starting our own little nodes of helping out? And so, like, I'm a medical communications guy and want to kind of help out and kind of get my own career in this area going.
So, yeah, guerrilla
there you
skeptics
go.
were being told that there are lots of,
Of this that you're passionate about. When,
Yeah.
you know, there's
He
so
said
many.
he does medical communications, so, there's a lot that you can do there.
submit articles to Science-Based Medicine. We're looking for new authors.
I think the most impactful thing you said, though, was being, committing to being the skeptic in your group of friends
Yeah.
or your family or whatever. Like, it's a combination of learning about skepticism and then learning how the patience to communicate it well. Like Phil Plait said, don't be a dick. It's like, when we first heard that, it was so like, a million times. It's in our book.
That one might be hard.
It is, look, I've